The night air beyond the wall smelled of frost and ancient secrets. A stillness so deep Jon Snow felt the quiet like a blade at his throat. Ghost padded ahead, crimson eyes reflecting the faint shimmer of aurora that danced over the ragged peaks. Every crunch of boot heel against crusted snow seemed an intrusion on something older than kingdoms, as though the land itself remembered the age before men learned to speak of gods and kings. He had come at the summons of Melisandre. Again, and though part of him still bristled at her cryptic fire and shadow riddles, another part listened, because ghosts did not haunt only the living, and the dead did not answer for themselves. The Red Priestess waited beside a circle of charcoal and broken glass, where her previous fires had cooled. Radiance leaked from a brazier at her feet, the coals glowing like molten rubies. Jon caught the scent of strange spices, half pleasant, half nauseating, carried on a wind that should have reeked only of pine and iron. Ghost bared his teeth, hackles rising, but Melisandre inclined her head with patient calm. "You feel it, don't you?" she asked. Her voice was low, melodic, yet laced with steel. The beating in the snow, the breath under the ice. R'hllor's enemy stirs, and so must his champion. Jon folded gloved hands over the hilt of Longclaw, frowning. "If you mean the others, I've seen enough. What I haven't seen is an army large enough to stop them." "You will." She knelt, casting orange halos across her face. "Look into the flame. Last time cost me a knife through the heart." He muttered, but he stepped nearer. The brazier flickered, flared, and for a heartbeat he smelled Winterfell's kitchens, suet burning in an iron pan, the cloying scent of summer peaches lying beneath snow. Then images flooded him, icy plains splitting under red light. A sword burning brighter than the dawn, corpses of white spiders tumbling into chasms like embers blown from a dying log. At the center, he stood wreathed in flame, eyes aglow like molten steel, yet frost spiraled about his boots without melting. Jon jerked back, heart hammering. "Illusions. Visions," she corrected. "Truths yet to claim you." He shook his head. "I'm no savior. I'm barely a Stark. Less a Targaryen, and not at all whatever god you worship." Melisandre rose, layers of scarlet silk rustling like a blood-soaked river. "You are Azor Ahai reborn, whether you accept or deny. But prophecy is a door, not a chain. Open it, and you shape the dawn. Refuse, and darkness shapes you." Jon stared past her at the blank horizon. Somewhere out there, the Night King marshaled ranks of silent monsters. The wall's shadow loomed behind him, cracked and thinning. Stubborn pride would not mend the breach left at Eastwatch. "Show me," he said at last. "If I'm to wield this power, show me how it ends." Melisandre's smile edged toward sorrow. "Power never ends, Jon Snow. Only those who bear it." "And how?" "It began with fire." Castle Black's courtyard filled with Night's Watch brothers, armored in patched mail and knotted black cloaks. They watched as Melisandre traced blazing runes across the snow. A pyre of weirwood branches rose at the center, slick resin hissing as flames licked upward. Jon stood before it stripped to the waist, skin goose-pimpled under the bite of frozen air. Davos Seaworth pressed a hand to Jon's shoulder. "You sure of this, lad?" Davos asked, storm-weathered eyes uneasy. "No," Jon admitted. "But nothing else has stopped the dead." Melisandre sprinkled powdered ruby into the fire. Sparks erupted, dancing into constellations that formed, dissolved, then reformed. A dire wolf devouring its tail, a sword splitting a crown, a dragon coiled in ash. "Repeat after me," she commanded in High Valyrian. The words tasted like hot wine on Jon's tongue, alien yet familiar, as though he had spoken them in dreams. The pyre whooshed higher, scorching his face. Ghost prowled the edge, letting out a low, questioning whine. "Vezov Kostagon Jivali, Ebra, Moghalyagon Athriva." Jon intoned, voice steady. "Blood to fire, flesh to light." Melisandre translated for those gathered. "Life to carry truth." She drew a slim dagger and sliced his palm. Jon did not flinch. Hot crimson pattered onto crackling branches. A howl rose, not from ghost, but from somewhere beneath the earth. Deep, ancient, tormented. The flames exploded upward, a pillar spiraling through snowfall, and within that column John saw faces. Maester Aemon, Ygritte, even his father, or the man he once called father. Their mouths moved soundlessly, eyes blazing. Fire swallowed him. Agony became ecstasy, heat and ice colliding until neither remained distinct. Every nerve sang with wind and thunder. Every heartbeat echoed an entire world's pulse. Light burrowed into his bones. Memories poured into him. Not his own, but belonging to men and women across centuries. A blacksmith in Valyria forging a blade that hummed with sorrow. A wildling mother singing to twins as snow buried her hut. A maester scratching prophecy onto yellowed parchment before strangling himself in despair. He felt them as intimately as his own flesh. When the flames parted, John knelt in ashes. Steam rose from his shoulders, muscles glittering with beads of molten frost that hardened into shimmer. His eyes opened, irises rimmed in gold. "My lord," Tormund Giantsbane whispered, awe eclipsing his usual brashness. John stood. In his grip, Longclaw shimmered, pale ripples of flame sheathing its Valyrian steel edge. But his hand felt unburned. The heat comforted, like Summerhall's hearth on a bleak day. Melisandre bowed her head. "The fire's answer. You are forged." John exhaled, white fog curling around lips that no longer felt the cold. Somewhere beyond the wall, he sensed claws scraping ice. Skulls cracking under the weight of endless trudging feet. And he sensed something else, a heartbeat beneath the snows of ages, a child of fire sleeping in darkness, waiting to be born. Word spread faster than raven wings. From White Harbor to the Trident, men whispered that the bastard of Winterfell now wielded flame against night. Sansa received the tale in the great hall's luminous gloom, knuckles blanching on carved weirwood arms of her chair. Bran's ravens confirmed it, a ripple in the river of time, where one branch of possibility glowed like molten gold, threatening to scorch every future it touched. Arya arrived that evening, silent as falling dusk. She crouched beside Bran beneath the heart tree. Sap bleeding down white bark like tears. "Is it true?" she asked. Bran's pupils clouded milky white. "I see him walking through storms that burn but do not consume." His voice had grown ethereal, half child, half echoed. "He wears light on his fingers, and something watches him through a mirror of frost." Something. Arya's steel gave her comfort. Needle hung at her belt like a promise. "The Night King?" "No," Bran murmured, reaching to touch a curling leaf. "Older. He remembers when the world was flame and shadow, before the first men named gods. He fears Jon will do what he could not." "Then?" "End winter," Arya whispered. The concept felt impossible, yet the wind in the Godswood was warmer. Buds that should not sprout until spring clung to branches soft and green. Sansa entered behind them, cloak dusty with midday ride. "We prepare," she said, cool and decisive. "If our brother becomes the realm's hope, Winterfell will be more than a symbol. We stand his shield." Arya smiled, a wolfish grin that flashed white in the lamplight. "And his dagger." Oh. The march north gathered like an avalanche. Wildlings streamed through the ruined gates of the wall, forming ragged columns behind Tormund. From the King's Road came armored ranks of men sworn to House Stark, banners snapping, a grey direwolf over Argent. The Vale answered Sansa's call, arming knights under bronze stars. Even Doran's spearmen rode north, their copper helms glinting hot amid snow glare. For Prince Quentyn had dreamed of firelight guiding him to an icy wall and woke with scars across his palms. Jon stood upon a rise overlooking Frostfang Pass. The army coiled below, torchlines snaking across slopes. Longclaw burned quietly at his side even when sheathed. Each breath he took drew in the world's sorrow, but in its cadence he heard hearts beating together. Hundreds, thousands, echoing the same vow. No more dark nights. Can mortals break a season? Davos asked, approaching. His cloak glittered with rhyme. Maybe not, Jon replied. But gods can, and gods live where men believe they do. Davos chuckled dryly. You've grown philosophical. Maybe I died once too often. Jon met his friend's gaze. If I fail, the world ends, Davos finished. I had considered. So don't fail, my lord. Jon clapped his shoulder. Sudden silence swept the valley. Snow fluttered, suspended in midair as if time staggered. Then, from the northern ridge, ice cracked with a report like splitting oak. Shapes emerged, slender, pallid, gleaming under moonlight, eyes glacial blue. They advanced without sound, breathless horrors mirrored by skeletal horses. And behind them strode the Night King. Upon a mare of dead muscle, blade of black crystal drawn. Jon felt the air thicken, a weight pressing him toward the frozen earth. But the coals inside his bones flared. He stepped forward, alone, and light blossomed from his skin. A hush rolled over allies and foes alike. He raised Longclaw. The sword's flame brightened, mirrored along the Night King's icy scimitar. This ends, Jon called, voice carrying like thunder across rushing silence. No one else needs die. The Night King tilted his head, expression unreadable. Frost crept over rock, whispering. He lifted his hand. A wall of corpses rose, wildlings slain long ago. Rangers lost, giants, mammoths, children. Their eyes shone sapphire. Jon's heart clenched. He recognized some faces. But the flame within him insisted. All deaths deserved meaning. If he faltered, their sacrifice remained a void. He pressed Longclaw's tip to the snow. Lore, grant them rest. Fire boomed outward, in a ring of searing crimson. Corpses collapsed into ash. The Night King's mount shrieked, legs shattering. Yet still the blue eyes burned unwavering. With a gesture, he summoned spears of ice that hurled through the sky. Jon lifted his free hand, and arcs of light. No blade, no arrow, but pure brilliance, met the spears mid-flight, scattering them into glitter. He heard Tormund roar battle lust. The armies clashed beneath the aurora. Steel ringing, horns blaring. Yet more than the blood and grit, Jon felt patterns. Every heartbeat, every fear and hope weaving a tapestry of living will. He gathered that energy. Longclaw blazed white. Jon charged. The Night King met him. Their weapons collided, frost steaming, fire sizzling, each stroke quaking stone. They were echoes of creation, heat battling cold at the dawn of time. Twice Jon deflected. Thrice he parried, yet the Night King moved with inhuman grace. A cut grazed Jon's cheek, freezing flesh. Jon riposted, but ice armor knitted itself instantly. He remembered Melisandre's words, power never ends. Only those who bear it. Prophecy was a door. Jon broke from the melee, retreating 3 paces. He sheathed Longclaw. Confusion flashed in the Night King's gaze. Jon spread his arms. The flame inside him raged. Come then. Strike. The Night King lunged. Blade met Jon's bare chest, yet instead of cutting, it sank into brilliant gold glow. Fire swallowed cold. Light raced along the obsidian sword, crawling up the Night King's arm, blazing through his crystalline body. The Night King shrieked an echo of 1,000,000,000 winters dying. Blue eyes burst into white, then darkness. A shockwave rolled outward, snow vaporizing into mist. The ground quaked. In distant ranks, whites collapsed, limbs twitching, then stilled forever. When whiteness cleared, Jon remained alone, arms lowered. A hush followed like the first dawn after long eclipse. Ravens cawed mournfully, wings black against pearl sky. He exhaled. Steam did not issue from his lips. Instead, warm breeze sighed across the valley. Snowflakes melted on grass shoots poking through crust. They found him kneeling beside Ghost, stroking the direwolf's fur. The beast's red eyes were soft, calm. Sansa dismounted. Skirts muddy. She walked to him. Is it done? Jon gazed at the eastern horizon where pale light teased the edge of night, though sun should not rise for hours. Not yet, he murmured. Winter is broken, but the wound must be sealed. Bran arrived, pushed in a wicker chair by Meera Reed over uneven ground. Blank eyes unfocused. Bran spoke in a voice both distant and intimate. The heart of winter beats beneath the Frostfangs, where the children of the forest forged the first shadows. Destroy it, and seasons will return to balance. Jon met his brother's gaze. And if we fail, then winter roams, homeless, forever hungry. They ventured into caverns of glimmering ice that wound beneath mountain roots. Torchlight refracted, casting hundreds of Jon's silhouettes across walls. At the rear moved Bran's ravens, shadowy swarm guiding the party deeper until torch flames dwindled. Yet still Jon's sword glowed, bathing stone in amber. They reached a chamber carved by primordial forces. In its center pulsed a crystalline heart, 20 feet tall, veins of dark energy webbing its surface. The heartbeat was palpable, each pulse echoing in bone marrow. Bran's chair stopped short of the threshold. Fire binds with ice, he warned. Touch it with both, else it will shatter the world. Jon remembered Smith's tunnels of Longclaw's forging. He turned to Sansa, Davos, Arya at his side. I go alone. No, Arya said, stepping forward, face pale but unwavering. Starks do this together. Sansa nodded. The North stands with you. Davos drew a breath. 7 hells. I'll not be called craven. Jon's chest warmed. Then you must trust me. He advanced. Ghost padded alongside. Silent sentinel. Light brightened, reacting to the heart's icy glow. Jon placed his left palm upon the crystal surface. Frost reached to swallow flesh, but fire within him met it. He laid Longclaw's burning blade against the heart. Opposites surged, scalding, frigid, creation, oblivion. The chamber lit, blinding amber, then seared white. Screams of ancient things drowned out rational thought. Jon did not withdraw. He let light flow through him, into crystal, as if he were merely conduit. He saw again the tapestry of lives. Every soldier who marched under his banner, every farmer praying for spring, every child fearing dark. They poured energy through the thread that was him. Ice cracked. Fire flooded cracks. Thunder pealed. The crystal heart shattered, not violently but dissolving into motes of luminescent snow that drifted upward, soft as feathers, disappearing through stone ceiling as if walls no longer existed. Silence fell. The heartbeat ceased. Air grew lighter, warmer. Water dripped from stalactites. Sansa approached, tears shimmering. She touched Jon's arm. It's over. He looked to Bran. The boy closed his eyes and smiled a faint, tired smile. The balance returns. And he sat. Spring arrived north first. Crocuses forced green stalks through snows that retreated day by day. Rivers burst their icy skins, roaring with meltwater. At Winterfell, blossoms budded on the heart tree. White petals streaked crimson like the weirwood's own tears of relief. Southward, storms swept away chill. Small folk in the Reach awoke to dew-heavy fields ready for seed a month early. The Iron Islands, long gray and soggy, basked under clear skies. Dorne's dry winds tempered to warm gentleness, coaxing orange groves to riotous bloom. But more remarkable than climate was the change in men. Stories flew. How Jon Snow faced winter's living heart and snuffed its pulse. How fire did not consume him, but embraced all. Yet Jon refused crowns. He rode with Davos and Tormund across freed valleys, healing burnt villages, raising shelters for widows, burying fallen whites with honor. When hailed as king, he answered, I am steward only. The realm belongs to its people. And people, in turn, began to see each other across former divides. A wildling child shared snowberries with a son of House Umber. Septons prayed beside red priests for bountiful harvests. In King's Landing, where rumor traveled last, small folk gathered in Flea Bottom at dusk, lit candles, and thanked to God they could not name for warm nights without fear. At Dragonstone, Daenerys Targaryen watched gulls wheel over sparkling waves, and asked her advisors whether she might rule without forging conquest if the world now learned to follow a man who rejected titles. Melisandre wandered alone onto a cliff above Cannibal Bay, sea spray whipping her crimson hair loose. She closed her eyes, feeling the sun, soft, honest sun, on her cheeks. She sensed the flicker of Jon's life in the distance, bright but not blazing. The god of fire no longer raged, but basked content, having tasted balance for the first time in an age. Was this what you wanted? She murmured to the wind. Or merely what we needed? Her ruby pendant dimmed, faint embers within darkening. She smiled, bittersweet. When at last its glow winked out completely, she opened her arms and became smoke on the sea breeze, a final ember returning to the great fire beyond. Jon Snow stood on a hill of young grass outside Winterfell. The tapestry of lives still hummed faintly inside him, but softer now, like distant bells. He felt no more god than man, merely a vessel that had emptied itself. Ghost sat at his heel, fur bright under sun that carried true warmth. Sansa joined him, skirts swishing through green blades. The realms will want words, she said gently. They'll have yours, Jon answered. You speak for the North better than I ever did. She considered him, then the horizon where forests shimmered new green. And you? Jon watched a cloud shaped like a direwolf drift lazily across blue. I've had enough of crowns and prophecies. He glanced at Ghost. There are tracks to follow, rivers to fish. Maybe children to teach how to climb before they can walk. Sansa's laugh was light. You will be remembered in song. Songs fade, he said, but his smile betrayed quiet peace. Spring doesn't. They stood together until evening painted sky in rose and gold. As the first stars emerged, neither named them for gods of fire or cold. They were simply lights, unburdened, and that was enough. Okay. Oh. Tendi. Ghost's muzzle twitched against the grass, and Jon opened his eyes to a dawn washed pale as watercolor, delicate and fleeting. 6 weeks had passed since he shattered the heart of winter and breathed warmth back into the world. Yet each sunrise still felt borrowed, a wonder fragile enough to crumble if he exhaled too sharply. He rose, brushed damp soil from his cloak, and strode toward Winterfell's east gate, where caravans queued like patient giants of timber and canvas. Axes rang beyond the outer palisade where small folk felled the last dying pines for new barns. Within, masons chiseled the scorched stones of the broken southeast watchtower. Rebirth, he thought, but even rebirth demanded blood. Fingers smashed beneath hammers, backs bowed beneath loads. Mothers who bartered sleep so babes could suckle. The cost of peace was merely paid in smaller quiet tragedies, instead of trumpet-loud battles. He crossed the Bailey. Gendry Baratheon, sent north by Davos with a train of Crownland smiths, wiped soot from his brow as he cooled a horseshoe in brine. Your Grace. The title leapt automatically from Gendry's tongue before embarrassment pinched his lip thin. Forgive me, Jon. Jon grinned. If Sansa hears that she'll have your head mounted beside the old kings of winter. 7 save me from Stark queens. Gendry said, but respect gleamed in his eyes. Your sister's set on restoring every bastion in the north. She's asked us to cast new grates for the great hall hearth. Copper filigree shaped like weirwood leaves. Half my lads have never etched such fine detail. You'll manage, Jon said. You've forged half a Dragon Queen's fleet. Something clouded Gendry's stare. He leaned close under the sizzle of his quenching vat. Word came by Raven last night. Dragonstow's banners fly north. Daenerys herself. 3 ships under Lady Reed's escort passed the Bight 2 days ago. Jon's pulse stumbled. He had known a reckoning would come. When he ended winter, Raven scattered across the realm like sparks. And the Dragon Queen, ever attuned to omens of fire, would not ignore rumors that a man walked in the world wearing light like a crown. Thank you, he said. Tell the lads extra ale rations tonight. Gendry's smile returned. I'll hammer twice as hard. He clanged iron upon anvil in salute. Jon climbed the winding steps of the inner keep. The breeze smelled of damp clay and newly thawed earth. Spring still shy, hesitating to trust her own miracle. In the high solar he found Sansa poring over ledgers, auburn hair braided in a coronet that glimmered with glass beads, shaped like direwolf fangs. She did not look up when he entered. Only when quill lifted did she speak. I was waiting until midday council, but the raven to Maester Tarek carried a second seal from Dragonstone. She slid the parchment across the oak desk. Daenerys seeks audience. Emral, Daenerys seeks audience. Jon rested both palms on cool wood. I feared it might be Cersei returned from the grave. Sansa permitted herself a thin smile. Queens seldom stay dead, but dragons rarely share a sky. And you, little brother, are a star some say outshines hers. She will want to see with her own eyes the fire that stole her worshippers. He winced. I never asked for worship. Yet you have it. Sansa tapped figures on her scrolls. In last fortnight alone White Harbor sent double tithes for the Avatar's coffers. The High Septon prays to the resplendent son of Erlor who brought dawn. And Dorne offers 1,000 spearwives for your guard. Her voice softened. You broke an age-old terror. People prefer their heroes alive enough to thank. I walked close to death to do it. Exactly. She folded her hands. So, accept the woman. Hear her terms. If she comes as rival, turn her into ally. The realm cannot endure another war before next spring's seed takes root. And now. He studied her calm, decisive poise and realized he relied on it, more each day. What of you, Lady of Winterfell? When southern lords named Robb, your grace he donned a crown and lost his head. I learned from my husband. She trailed. Memories of Ramsay left scars, thicker than plate armor. I learned that crowns demand more than any sane soul can give. I am content to rule these halls and steer my brother's legend away from rocky shoals. Jon rounded the desk and kissed her brow. Then anchor me, Sansa, Dada. I'll drift otherwise. And Sawatri. And Ando. The harbor at White Harbor bustled beneath a sky the color of freshly polished steel. Fishermen shouted over mounds of writhing cod, while Merling King banners snapped along the Manderley docks. Arya Stark, hair cropped to a ragged shoulder length that defied both court and convent, perched atop the prow of a sleek gray skiff. She squinted toward the horizon and saw 3 sails unfurl, black canvases emblazoned with scarlet 3-headed dragons. Her pulse thrummed the same rhythm she recalled from Braavos, when biding time just before something lethal and thrilling leapt between heartbeats. A gust stirred. Needles slapped gently against her hip. Dragon Queen's sigil carries weight, the skiff's oarmaster muttered beside her. Some folks say she left her last surviving dragon in marine stables and rides north as plain woman now. Dragons never ride plain, Arya said. They simply choose whether to bear fire on their tongues. He gave her a sidelong glance. And you, lady, choose what? To test whether legends cut as sharp as steel. She hopped from gunwale to pier before ropemen secured the boat. Northern guards recognized her embroidered direwolf and led her past to the main quay where a small honor guard assembled. Sir Royce of the Vale, Aelys Karstark, 2 silent sisters of the faith as courtesy envoys, and the merman's trumpet corps ready to give the royal salute. Drums rolled, drowning gull calls. The first Dragonstone galley eased alongside, hull scraping barnacled pilings. A gangplank thumped down. Out strode a woman in rich crimson and black wool, shoulders squared, bearing no crown. Platinum hair whipped behind her like a comet's tail. At each step, armored unsullied matched pace, shields etched with Valyrian glyphs of fire and blood. She halted before Sir Royce, eyes sweeping the guard, and Arya marked keen tension, alert but withheld, as though Daenerys Targaryen balanced between a greeting of silk and a threat of talon. I am Daenerys of House Targaryen, first of my name, she said. I come seeking parley with Jon Snow of Winterfell. Sir Royce bowed stiffly. The North welcomes your grace. A Stark emissary shall escort you forthwith." He gestured to Arya. Daenerys assessed the younger woman's calloused hands and wolf-gray tunic. "You are Arya, ... Stark," Arya confirmed. "Follow me if you'd like to avoid the crowd's questions. They've never seen a dragon up close." "Neither will they today," Daenerys said quietly, but Arya detected faint regret. Rhaegal's death, Drogon vanished. The queen traveled with only scaled memories. Arya turned toward awaiting carriage horses. As they wound through cobbled streets, Daenerys parted a carriage curtain to watch townsfolk. Children chased each other across thaw-slick stones, while women hung sprigs of new green herb above doorways. Her voice, when it came, quivered with confusion. "They smile. I expected fear. I have read letters claiming their son-child wilds greater flame than dragons." Arya shrugged. "No fear left to carve. Winter's End emptied that store. They have little enough, but warmer nights promise more." She peered sidelong. "You wish them to fear?" "I wish them to live," Daenerys answered, firm. "But men who live forget gratitude quickly. Dragons remind." Arya thought of peasants flayed in King's Landing, of faces shriveled by wildfire. She rested a hand on Needle. "The reminder can be gentle. Cold reminders never are," Daenerys said. The wheels clattered on stone and conversation lapsed into measured breathing. And now, in Winterfell's great courtyard, the welcoming party gathered. Banners of Stark, Baratheon, Arryn, Manderly, Karstark, Dorne's golden spear's son, and Dragonstone's red drake aflame. Jon stood at the head in black leathers undone at the collar, long claw sheathed at hip, though its wolf pommel gleamed brighter than any jewel. Sunlight kissed his hair charcoal silver, and Daenerys felt heat travel veins that had run chilled since Drogon vanished east with her dreams of conquest. She descended the carriage steps. Guards peeled back. Jon bowed, neither humble nor haughty, a man greeting equal burden. "Queen Daenerys," he said. "King Jon," she replied. He shook his head. "No crown, Dotch. Merely warden, in all but name. Memshai. Your subjects differ. They call what saved them whatever name brings comfort." She eyed the silent awe among the watching throng, as though Jon radiated low embers. "Comfort is fickle. Fire burns bright until another takes the spark." "Perhaps," he agreed. "But sparks can be shared." He extended his hand. After a pause, he placed hers within. Warmth bled skin to skin. Not uncanny, but reminiscent of Hearthstone. He guided her toward the hall. Ghost circled once, nose testing her scent, then trotted to heel. Unsullied stiffened, but Daenerys waved them still. Inside the refurbished great hall, roaring fires danced behind the newly fitted copper filigree Gendry's apprentices had set. Tables bore early spring fare, boiled turnips, river trout, crusty oat loaf, and berry wine coaxed from last year's stores. They sat at the high table flanked by advisors. Davos, Sansa, Tyrion Lannister returned from exile, under a northern guarantee. For Tyrion had slipped north months prior bearing secret letters from Samwell Tarly in Old Town. The free cities whispered of him as envoy between scattered maesters. And Bran, whose chair of weirwood roots now sprouted living shoots to spite Mordor. Daenerys studied Bran's unfocused gaze, the godswood blooming inside stone walls. The three-eyed raven's power appears changed. "Balanced," Bran answered softly. "Ice no longer strangles roots. Fire no longer scorches sap." He turned eyes milky and endless upon her. "Your path leads east, not north." She frowned. "I sailed north to see the man who turned winter to spring. To see whether your dragons yet matter," Bran corrected. "They do, but not as you expect." Jon cleared his throat. "Bran's riddles aside, we all gather for the realm's future. Queen Daenerys, what do you ask?" She drank wine, licked berry residue from lips. "When I crossed the narrow sea, I believed the Iron Throne my destiny. Now men hail you as God King. If the realm clings to that myth, I might claim nothing but ash." "Benderu." Jon opened palms. "Take nothing, claim nothing. Help us rebuild instead." "Without rule?" Without tribute? With partnership, Sansa said. The North remains sovereign. The South need not kneel. A council of realms, not thrones. Tyrion fingers steepled. A great experiment. One I once proposed after Dragon Pit parley. Kings and queens sharing decisions rather than crowns. Daenerys laughed. Not mock but weary. I sought throne to break wheels, Sir Imp. Now you propose wheels within wheels. Jon's brows knit. If you desire more than justice, if you desire new dawns for freedmen across the seas, then share the forge. No one flame can temper every blade. She studied his eyes. Storm gray, reflecting candlelight like distant lightning. There was no hunger for power, no false humility, merely a man bone-tired of death. Something inside her loosened, a knot drawn tight since the day Drogon wept ashes on King's Landing's scorched streets. She set her goblet down. I will listen, she said. And so. Night draped Winterfell while horns sounded from watchtowers. 3 low, mournful blasts that once signaled the others. Jon jolted upright from restless sleep, half dreaming of blue shadows. Shirtless, sword in hand, he dashed to ramparts. Flaming torches revealed a column of riders galloping hard from the north, hooves spraying mud flecked with ice shards. The lead horse bore an emaciated man whose cloak tattered like crow wings. He collapsed as gate chains rattled open. Jon knelt, cradling his head. Tors, he muttered, recognizing a ranger missing since the war's end. Ghost. Tors rasped, lips purple. Beyond Hearthaw Vale, we saw, gods old and cruel. His eyes rolled white. The sky bleeds fire. Mountains burn from within. Jon felt a cold he thought banished spiral his spine. He lifted the ranger onto a litter. Fetch Master Talrek. To the remaining riders, mostly wildlings under Tormund, he demanded explanation. Tormund spat grit. A lake of ice cracked 3 days north. We hunted elk and found instead rivers steaming blood. Mountains glow like forge kilns. His face, usually blazing mirth, now shadowed dread. Burning men walked the snows, cloaked in cinder, eyes bright as coals. They did not freeze Jon Snow. Jon's thoughts raced to visions glimpsed in Melisandre's flames, forces of shadow under burning sky. He said, Fire whites. Davos appeared clutching cloak. 7 Save us, lad. Did we break winter only to unleash hell? Arya arrived next, breath misting. If there are enemies, we meet them before they reach green fields. Jon shook his head slowly. We meet them where they rise. No. At dawn, a war council convened. Bran's ravens had returned hours before, feathers singed at tips. He spoke with voice faint but urgent. When you shattered Iceheart, fire escaped too. Not R'hllor's tame flame, but raw creation trapped since the long night first waned. It seeks new shape. Already cracks in earth birth creatures forged of molten earth and malignant will. They march south, drawn to the Avatar who carries their ember. Jon swallowed. In me. Yes, Bran said. As winter's death ended imbalance. So must fire's fury be calmed. It calls itself the Ember King, a name from the first tongue meaning that which burns paths. Daenerys listened, fists clenched. I know that song. In Valyria, priests spoke of an elemental lord shackled beneath volcanoes by dragonlords, sorcery. They harnessed its heat to shape stone into castles. Tyrion tapped quill against map. Then Valyria may hold answers. Bran's eyes clouded. I see only roiling smoke. Wing beats like thunder. Jon must journey there, but not alone. Jon exhaled. He turned to Daenerys. Will you fly with me? Tears sprang unbidden to her eyes. I have no dragons. Only Drogon lives, and he vanished over the Shadowlands. Then we sail, he said. She grasped his wrist. I will stand beside you in fire. Sansa's jaw tightened. The North cannot spare you. Jon walked to her, gently cupped her face. It must. You hold these people safe. Leave this to me. If you die—" she whispered. "Then light another torch," he said. "Heroes are sparks, but songs belong to those who survive." He kissed her brow and felt her tremble like a taut bowstring before steel relaxes. And now, within a week, Winterfell's shipwrights finished refitting the Wyvern's Fang, a Myrish cruiser seized during the War of Five Kings. Its copper-sheaved hull gleamed, trimmed with newly carved direwolf and dragon figurehead. Davos commanded the voyage, seasoned saltwater etched into every crease. Gendry supervised ballista installation. Tyrion loaded casks of wildfire, insurance he reasoned, against molten demons. Tormund insisted on joining, claiming southern wines tasted like goat piss, and he needed better tales to bed maidens. Arya stowed aboard uninvited, emerging from hold as the ship cleared harbor. She met Jon's scowl with a shrug. "Try keeping a wolf from the hunt." Daenerys, wrapped in fur cloak trimmed sable, watched chalk cliffs shrink behind. "I've crossed oceans before. This feels different." Jon leaned on the rail beside her. "Last time we were enemies allied by chance. Now perhaps friends allied by need." "Perhaps," she echoed. Sea spray jeweled her lashes. Night gathered. Stars freckled velvet sky. On quarterdeck, Bran sat tranced amid ravens perched along rigging like curious attendants. Flames flickered within braziers bolted to deck, not for warmth, but for his visions. Jon approached. "Do you see Valyria?" he asked. "I see paths," Bran murmured. "Ash winds swirl over ruins. Beneath basalt arches, a forge of worlds pulses. At its heart stands a sword not made by hands." Jon's pulse quickened. "Lightbringer? Or its shadow?" Bran's mouth tightened. "Bond fire to blood and ice to temper, else the sword will cleave sun from sky." Jon's hand brushed Longclaw's grip. "Prophecies again. Doors, not chains," Bran reminded softly. He left Bran to visions and joined Daenerys near Helm. She pointed to distant horizon where crimson smudge stained clouds. "Volcanic ash," she said. "We near Broken Arm. Tomorrow we see smoking waters." Jon rested back against bulwark. Sleep felt distant, dreams chasing him even waking. He recalled Torzer words. "Sky bleeds fire." What awaited them might demand more than the light living inside his bones. Valyria rose like a dorsal fin of the world, jagged spines of obsidian, and twisted towers clinging to islets in a sea, the texture of spilled ink. Lightning licked perpetually between thunderheads, yet no storm blew, only static charge crackling hair. Somewhere within that maelstrom a low droning hum vibrated hull planks. They rode smaller skiffs along canals clogged with black glass shards. Steam curled from fissures. Stone dragons half-melted leered through vine webs of petrified metal. Tyrion whistled low. If ever a place welcomed visitors, this is not it. Gendry spied a causeway intact enough to tether boats. The party disembarked. Jon, Daenerys, Arya, Davos, Gendry, Tormund, Tyrion, and a dozen unsullied. Bran remained aboard, too frail for jagged paths, yet ravens shadowed overhead. They followed a corridor carved into cliffside, footsteps echoing like hammers upon hollow bronze. Carvings along walls depicted dragon lords forging chains around a humanoid figure, wreathed in tongues of flame. Ruby dust embedded in bas-relief eyes shimmered with internal light. Daenerys brushed a glyph. Dracarys, the command of fire. She traced adjoining runes. Here they imprisoned the Ember King with 12 dragon hearts as seals. Tyrion frowned. Dragon hearts are rare these days. Jon's gaze slid to Daenerys. She swallowed. Rhaegal, Viserion, Meraxes, and others long dead may still serve this spell. But the seals weaken. If the Ember King stirs, he may have consumed stolen dragonfire to break bonds. Roar thundered from deep below, rolling quake that dislodged obsidian shards raining down. Tormund laughed like a madman. Now there's a beast singing welcome. They descended switchback stairs until reaching a cavern where magma pooled crimson gold. At center, rose a dais of fused dragon bones. Upon it stood a figure 9 feet tall, skin molten glass, swirling with embers. Eyes blazed white, fissures along arms vented sparks. He wore no armor yet exuded unbreakable poise. "The Avatar comes," the figure boomed, voice overlapping itself like choral inferno. "Return what is mine." Jon stepped forward, long claw unsheathed. Flames flared along its blade. "I stole nothing. I release the world from winter's choke. I seek balance." "Balance?" The giant laughed. A furnace roar. "While I lay bound, ice tyrant gorged millennia on living fear. Now my time to feast, balance shall be kindled in eternal blaze." Daenerys advanced, hair whipping in thermal drafts. "You consume dragon hearts. You burn unborn villages in your breath. Release your claim." The creature's gaze lingered upon her. "Blood of drakes flows thick. Offer your fire and I shall spare your kin." Jon interposed, sword raised. "No." A pillar of flame erupted between them. Unsullied shields warped from heat. Davos dragged Tyrion back. Arya dashed behind column. Tormund howled, gripping war axe, but molten projectiles forced him to duck. Jon strode through the fire. It parted around him, licking leather but leaving flesh intact. Ember King, cocked head. "Child of light, thinks flame his servant." "Not servant," Jon said. "Partner." He slashed. Light sheathed longclaw met molten palm. Sparks exploded. Sword rang like bell forged sunward. The creature retaliated with backhand of liquid iron gale force. Jon flew against basalt wall. Felt ribs crack yet fire within stitched fractures instantly. He surged again, each step leaving footprints glowing white-hot, then cooling. Arya flicked daggers, aiming joints. Blades hissed molten, disintegrating before impact. She cursed, rolled aside. Daenerys seized a fallen spear, lunged. Molten giant swatted her, sending her skidding near magma pool. She screamed as heat seared boots. Jon turned, lacking breath to call, but Daenerys already dragged herself upward, eyes blazing fury. On platform above, Gendry spotted chain hoists, formerly used by dragon lords to lower ore crucibles. He shouted at Davos and Unsullied to man winches. They levered massive iron cages, once meant to hold dragon eggs. Jon exchanged blows with Ember Titan, each strike rattled cavern. He remembered Bran's words, bond fire to blood, and ice to temper. Ice, but where find ice in this inferno? Ghost barked from tunnel entrance. Jon glimpsed white blurred darting amidst heat haze. Direwolf's howl amplified across stone, and with it a gale of unnatural chill whirled through corridor. Bran had sent ravens circling above opening to tug down a pocket of high-altitude frost. The rushing cold struck magma's surface, hiss of steam fog filled cavern, obscuring. Ember King staggered, cracks cooling brittle along limb. Jon's heart hammered. He closed eyes, pictured walls blue nights, the taste of snow on beard. Ygritte's laugh in falling flakes. Cold blossomed in his veins alongside inner flame, two lovers merging. He raised long claw two-handed. Blade flashed dual aura. Frost filigree over flame core. He drove steel into creature's chest. Ember King roared as frost raced fissures, locking molten arteries. Flame contended but found no vent. Ice encased compressing heat. "Now!" Jon shouted. Gendry's team released chains. Iron cages swung overhead, crashing down upon the giant. Each ring etched with ancient Valyrian runes Daenerys read earlier. Wards binding fire. Cages clamped around limbs, dropping the Titan to one knee. Daenerys limped forward, palms bleeding. She recited draconic incantations, voice trembling yet strong. Runes on cages ignited vivid orange, siphoning heat. Tyrion, coughing smoke, nudged barrel of wildfire precariously perched near platform edge. Arya saw. Sprinted, plunging needle tip to split seal. Green flames erupted. She rolled aside as the barrel toppled, splashing alchemical fire across Ember King's lower half. Where liquid wildfire met Valyrian wards, energies reacted, swirling into emerald cocoon. The giant shrieked. In that moment, Jon sank Longclaw hilt deep, channeling both frost memory and inner dawn. Sword pulsed, absorbing obscene heat, then venting it skyward in beam of white that punched through cavern roof, blasting obsidian spire into night. Silence shattered, followed by rumble as ceiling chunks crashed. Unsullied dragged wounded clear. Ember King collapsed, charred core flickering. Jon withdrew sword. Giant's body crystallized into obsidian statue, limbs locked in final agony. Light ebbed. Daenerys leaned on Jon. "Is it over?" Bran's ravens swarmed inside, cawing triumphant. One alighted on Jon's shoulder. Bran's voice issued uncanny soft. "Fire is tempered. World is whole." Jon zagged. Heartbeat slowed to mundane thud. For first time since Pyre rebirth, he felt simply mortal. And now, they retreated to ships as gray dawn filtered through ash clouds now thinning. Valyria's constant thunder subsided to distant echo. Steam vents cooled. Molten rivers crusted into black glass. A hush lay heavy, broken only by flapping sails catching hesitant breeze. On deck, Bran awaited, smiling faintly. "The balance holds," he told them. Then, softer to Jon alone, "The door is closed. You need not bear flame again." End. Jon felt both relief and grief, a strange emptiness where divine hum once thrummed. "Good," he said, voice hoarse. "Let gods mind their own wars." Daenerys stood beside Gendry, watching sunrise paint clouds rose gold. No more red tinge, only natural light. She turned to Jon. "Dragons still have purpose, but perhaps not as conquerors." He nodded. "Build, not burn." He extended hand. She clasped, smiling. Tormund clapped their shoulders. "Now that's one hell of a honeymoon spot we left behind. Lava pools and all." "Then no." Arya laughed, sound free, tossing dagger end over end. "Try bathing in wildfire first, Giant Slayer." Davos chuckled. Tyrion reached for quill, already composing saga. Jon leaned on rail, ghost pressed against thigh. Breeze carried scent of salt and distant pine. Ahead lay north, south, realms without unnatural winter or devouring flame. Work waited, fields to plow, keeps to mend, councils to convene so children might argue about taxes rather than monsters. He closed his eyes, breathed ordinary ocean air. The world no longer throbbed through his veins. Instead, one steady heartbeat matched his own, a simple cadence enough to guide any man who dared to live without crowns or prophecies. Somewhere far above, twin trails of smoke and frost intertwined across sky, then faded into blue. And that, he thought, was balance. Two forces touching only just long enough to birth dawn, then letting go. He opened his eyes to the rising sun of a new day and smiled. "Okay. The gulls that wheeled above White Harbor, that spring seemed louder than any Jon remembered from his youth. Their cries half mockery and half anthem, as the wyvern's fang ghosted past the stone lighthouse, and moored beneath the Merling King's bearded effigy. 6 weeks crawling home from Valyria had left salt etched into every crease of plank and sole. But the ship sailed in quiet seas. Storms had shied from her wake as though the world itself protected the cargo of fragile peace housed in weary bodies. Jon disembarked last. The gangplank shuddered under the Unsullied's even march, under Gendry's smiths, hauling barrels of raw obsidian, under Tyrion's carefully crated scrolls, smuggled out of low Valyrian vaults. When Jon set foot on the pier, Ghost uttered a low chuff, as if to say ground at last, then bounded ahead to nose bundled nets. Jon paused. For months the fire that once threaded his veins had guttered to an ember. Now that ember warmed with a jubilant spark he hadn't felt since he was a boy racing Robb along the battlements. Sansa rode down the causeway at a brisk trot, cloak of dusk-blue wool streaming like a banner. Arya, who had raced a courier south days earlier, sat behind her on the same horse, a grin splitting her wind-reddened face. Jon's heart rose. Sansa slid from the saddle, boots splashing in shallow lapping water. Formalities vanished. Brother and sister met, foreheads touching. The long silence of kin, who need no language to measure distance, closed at last. "You're thin as a birch branch," she murmured. "And you could rule 3 kingdoms with one raised brow," he answered. The words broke a dam. They laughed, rough, joyous bursts that startled dockhands. Behind him, Daenerys stepped onto the pier, pale from weeks of deck sway, yet tall and spare as a spear, her silver braid draped over one shoulder. Sansa's laughter cooled, courtesy replacing ease. They bowed, graceful queen to pragmatic lady, and returned each a nod's measure of respect earned upon black glass aisles. Ghost pressed wet nose to Arya's hand. She scratched his ears. "Did you slay another god?" she teased Jon. "Something less and more," he said. "We caged a furnace before it melted the world." "Better you than me," she replied. "I'm done with cages." Her gray eyes darted inland. "Bran's waiting. He says the trees sing louder every day." Jon felt the world hum under his boots. "Let's hear what they're saying." They rode north with a small retinue. Davos, Tyrion, Daenerys, Gendry, 24 unsullied who insisted upon guarding their queen, and Tormund who swore every village along the King's Road needed to see a free folk hero's beard to believe tall tales. Wild colts grazed where snows once crept. Meadows shimmered with new bud. Peasants knelt as they passed. Then, seeing Jon wave them upright, they straightened shyly and waved back instead. He preferred that. They reached Winterfell, amid scented dusk. Candle-lit banners fluttered over ramparts rebuilt. The cracked towers stood sheathed in new quarried granite. Bran awaited beneath the heart tree, wheelchair half swallowed by fresh sprouted roots. Petals drifted upon his dark cloak, like flakes of first snow reversed into flowers. As Jon approached, Bran offered a frail smile. "Hello, brother," he said, voice thick as if pulled through earth. "Do you hear it?" Jon closed his eyes. The godswood whispered with bees, with ravens preening, with wind weaving through boughs. Something deeper underlay the obvious, a pulse neither ice nor fire, but sunlit water lapping hidden banks. "Balance." "I hear quiet," he whispered. "Quiet is a song," Bran answered. "And songs can be broken." His blind gaze settled upon Daenerys behind Jon. The last notes wait for her dragon. Drogon, gone these many seasons. Daenerys folded arms. "If he returns, he flies free." "Free things still choose," Bran said. "When the world stumbles, he may weigh the skies." Sansa entered, handing Bran a parchment. "There will be stumbling sooner than we hoped." She faced Jon and Daenerys. "A raven from King's Landing. The Iron Throne is gone, torn out stone by stone after the bells, but lords gathering in the city demand a voice from the north and from House Targaryen. A great council meets at harvest." Jon's stomach nodded. He had left thrones behind in volcanic glow, but politics hunted like winter wolves. He looked at Daenerys. She gazed toward stars barely igniting the velvet sky. "Then we give them voices louder than swords," she said softly. "And in Cell." The journey south proved stranger than the voyage home. Everywhere, crofts sprouted green where brown wastes slept only a year before. Men who had buried children to frost now bartered early apples. Yet along those orchards, Jon saw gibbets where petty usurpers hung for raiding neighbors, when law had thawed slower than ground. Peace grew, but weeds of old grievances coiled thick. They passed Harrenhal's broken teeth. Steam no longer hissed from cracks, pools glittered with new rain. Gendry marveled at warped iron fused into curtains of hardened ripple. Dragonflame could not finish the ruin, he mused, but time will. Tyrion answered, "Time finishes all ruins, even living ones." He glanced at Jon's quiet profile. "Unless men mend them first." Outside the capital, tents bloomed across the plains. Banners of Baratheon stag, Tully trout, Martell spear, Tyrell rose now sprouting again under Lord Willa's steady hand, and the proud falcon of the Vale. At the camp's center loomed the scorched shell of the Red Keep, its upper towers raised, its lower halls converted into assembly cloisters, where dragons once soared. Scaffolds creaked with stonemasons' mallets. They arrived unannounced, foregoing horns or grand entry. Still, word raced. The Avatar of Light, the Dragon Queen, the Wolf Queen's envoys had come. A council convened in the shattered throne room, open to sky where roof collapsed. Marble floors gleamed from weeks of scrubbing, yet char remained in seams. Jon, in plain leather and grey wool, took no dais. He stood among other sworn lords. Daenerys wore black trimmed in stark white, hair loose to wind, as though claiming no house but alliance. Gendry, recognized as Baratheon of Storms, and now that no one contested the bastard whose hammer had fought the dead, thumped his staff as herald. Lords and ladies, by the bonds of realm and blood, we gather to forge a charter of dawn. Viscount Mallister shifted uneasily, muttering that poems suited bards, not laws. Yet the words lingered. Charter of dawn, hope clinging to syllables. Tyrion advanced, unrolled a parchment, as long as a galley sail. We propose. A network error occurred. Please check your connection and try again. If this issue persists, please contact us through our help center at help@openai.com. It looks like you just sent the letter, VV. Could you let me know what you'd like me to do next? Perhaps continue the story further, make revisions, or start something new? I'm ready whenever you are. The Merling King's salt-worn face watched Jon with the half-pitying, half-stern expression every carved god acquired after 2 centuries of wind and gull droppings. In its stony eyes he imagined judgment and blessing both, and neither comforted him. His boots struck the pier with a muted echoed, thick mats of drying seaweed cushioned the boards, making each step feel like walking on old parchment. Behind him, Davos supervised sailors lowering wrapped bundles of obsidian onto waiting wagons, while Gendry shouted measurements for a new crane to Manderley dock workers who stared as though a blacksmith had become a warlock in their absence. White Harbor's spring air smelled honestly of fish guts and hope. Nets glittered where they'd been hung to bleach, and the pink blossoms of crabapple trees scattered across slate roofs like spilled paint. Children in coarse gray tunics pointed at the unsullied and giggled, then shrank back the moment one bronze-masked warrior turned his head. But the soldiers remained expressionless, spears vertical, armor buffed to a dull sheen after weeks of brine. They looked smaller without looming threats to skewer, as if peace stole inches from their height. Daenerys disembarked, flanked by 2 Dothraki blood riders who had never seen water wider than the Trident before this voyage. They stepped onto the pier with the caution of cats onto a frozen pond, hiding anxiety beneath arrogant posture. She lifted her hood to reveal hair that had darkened at the tips where salt and sun had kissed the platinum into gold. The harbor crowd hushed. It was one thing to hear stories that the Dragon Queen lived yet, quite another to see her glide along northern timber as if she had every right to claim the chill wind for her own. Rumor had painted her 9 feet tall, wreathed in shadow fire, and the real woman was slight, tired, undeniably regal. Jon reached her side. He noticed the freckles blooming across her cheeks, evidence she had stood long on deck in midday light, to watch empty horizons she feared would never yield safe land again. They look at you like a new star, she murmured without smile. The same way they look at you, he answered. Except they know how stars can fall. She let that rest, and together they walked toward Lord Manderley's waiting guard. Tyrion limped at their heels, seasickness lingering in a pale cast around his eyes, though the dwarf still managed a conspirator's grin at every scandalized gasp he drew from unsuspecting nobles. Arya, nowhere to be seen, was already vanished into the warren of waterfront taverns and alleyways, for she claimed that a city's truths lived in its gutters long before they reached its thrones. Lord Wyman Manderley greeted them beneath a striped canopy, embroidered hastily with both direwolf and dragon. His double chins wobbled as he bowed deeper than weight or dignity should allow, but northern courtesy held firm. Fish scale buttons strained across his belly, and the jeweled clasp at his collar flashed sapphire. Rumor said he polished it thrice a day, waiting for this arrival. Winterfell's banners command our loyalty, he declared, voice booming enough to drown the gulls. And Dragonstone's honor deserves feast and hearth. White Harbor offers both. Nay. Behind him, rows of serving girls held platters of fried eel, crab casseroles, and an experimental dish manderly named sea lion pie that emitted a smell reminiscent of tallow and regret. Jon's stomach turned, but Daenerys accepted a sliver and ate it without blinking, winning respect from every watching cook. Formalities ended quickly, for letters from Winterfell had begged haste. The North-South Council would meet within 12 days at Moat Cailin, a neutral ground where new roads converged. Sansa wrote that envoys from every realm save the Iron Islands were already camped beneath the ruined towers, waiting to see if talk might serve the realm a final time before sorpened again out of old habit. Jon doubted talk alone could mend a world that had been stitched with war for so long, it forgot other patterns. But, he reminded himself, ice shattered and fire quelled, miracles bred new habits. They left that afternoon, wagons creaking over brick-red river roads. Pastures once snow-buried now sprouted flax and early beans. Tors, the recovered ranger, rode ahead with a small guard, nostrils flaring at every tree as if sniffing for stray embers. His screams in the sickbed still echoed in Jon's memory. Sky bleeds fire, mountains burn from within. Jon promised him the molten men were statues now, but promises did not lift nightmares. 2 days south, they crossed into rolling moor where the wind teased long grass into ocean waves of green. Here, the first real test of their alliance arrived. House Bolton's standard, a flayed man newly painted, blocked the road. A wedge of riders in pink cloaks awaited, led by Sir Benfred Bolton, a cousin twice removed from the bastard who once ruled. His father had sworn fealty after Ramsay's death, but fealty sat ill on Bolton's shoulders. Benfred's pale eyes narrowed as Jon's column halted. "You travel with foreign blades," he said, gaze flicking from Unsullied to Dothraki. "The North bleeds memory of southern tyrants." "The North bleeds memory of Bolton's flaying it," Tormund growled, voice like gravel under hooves. Benfred's hand dipped toward his pommel. Jon nudged Longclaw's hilt but did not draw. "Let's not salt old wounds. We ride to council where all houses speak freely. You can join or stand aside." Benfred's lip curled. "Council's a stark trap. Winterfell would mask crown behind parley. A true North bows to no dragon spawn either." He spat near Daenerys Stallion's hoof dart. Before Jon responded, Daenerys rode forward. Her expression was not anger, but weary curiosity. "How old are you, sir?" He blinked. 22. "I was that age when I saw my brother's armor melted onto his flesh like wax. He died screaming for a crown." Her voice never rose, yet every Bolton rider leaned back. "If you wish to follow his path, wager your men on it. But consider, the world is kinder now, and kinder worlds hold fewer thrones to seize. Choose life." Benfred's knuckles whitened. He weighed ambition against survival. Finally he spat again, this time away from hooves. "Bolton's seat will hear counsel." He wheeled and galloped off, riders in tow. Grass bowed in their wake. Tyrion exhaled loudly. "One dragon, no fire, yet the sheep scatter. Fascinating." "No," Jon corrected. "They hesitate. Next time words may fail." "Now." They pressed on. Nights fell soft, scented by heather. Bran's ravens shadowed them until Moat Cailin's black silhouettes pierced dawn mist like broken teeth. The fortress, half sunken into swamp, had been cleared by Sansa's crews, walkways of oak planks lain over bog, tar pitch ceiling towers against further decay. Colorful pavilions dotted drear knolls, each banner a statement. Tyrell Golden Rose reborn under Lady Ellery. Baratheon crowned stag for King's Landing's boy King Edric Storm, newly legitimized by popular clamor. Martell's son and spear flown by Prince Quentyn. Arryn Falcon and Quentyn. Arryn Falcon and Crescent. Tully leaping trout under Edmure now freed. Even Tyrell Krakens for Lady Asha Greyjoy. She came not for friendship, but curiosity. And perhaps plunder, if talk soured to war. Sansa awaited at the gatehouse. Grey Cloak billowed, black wool gown belted with narrow steel band shaped like intertwined wolves. Small council badges gleamed on her shoulders, wolf for the north, heart tree for Riverlands, and a new emblem. Twin cross torches, one blue and one red, flame tips touching. Promise, she explained when John clasped her wrist in greeting. A promise that light and cold learned respect. She eyed Daenerys with equal warmth. You survived Valyria. Survival was the least of it, Daenerys answered, voice low. They embraced as sisters might after strange war, awkward, but genuine. The hall where they convened had once been a Bolton torture vault. Sansa's masons ripped iron rings from walls and replaced them with candelabras. Long tables arranged in a circle left no one at the top, though everyone knew who carried weight. The first meeting began at midday, while distant frogs croaked in reed-choked pools. Jon rose to speak first. He described shattering winter and quelling fire in plain terms, leaving legend to bards. He ended, balance is fragile. We need laws shaped by all realms, so no lord unsettles it for petty feud. Then Edric Storm, lanky, earnest, still marveling he wore black and gold, asked, then what of the Iron Throne? Tyrion, standing behind Jon's chair, answered, melted in dragonfire. This council must craft seats instead of thrones, seats anyone can vacate without war. Lord Glover scratched beard. What shape takes justice between realms? Stormlanders hang thieves. Ironborn drown them. Dorn exiles cannot share one rope. Da. Bran's voice drifted from wicker chair moved specially onto wooden ramp. Resolve like rivers meeting the sea. Currents merge but keep you for leagues. Lord squinted, unsure if they'd been guided or mocked. Daenerys offered tangible vision. Each region elects 2 envoys every 5 years. We gather yearly at Harrenhal, rebuilt as neutral keep to debate trade, law, defense. A high steward chosen by lot presides, barred from holding office twice. Lot, scoffed Lady Asha. Boot propped on bench. Might as well ask the drowned god to pick. Davos countered, Lot spares us endless scheming for crown. A steward with no army serves not by sword but by oath. Debate burned through daylight into torchlit evening. Compromise seeds took root. A standing northern guard at the wall, remanned by volunteers from every coast. Dragon pit on Dragonstone converted into council amphitheater. Levy caps limiting any house standing swords to the number of harvest barns they maintained, linking war capacity to welfare of small folk. Skeptics bristled. Lord Rowan muttered of barefoot peasants dictating matters of steel. Prince Quentyn sighed that Dorne had kept peace for a century without northern sermons. Yet between each clash, Jon's calm and Sansa's measured logic coaxed new vantage. When Arya, unseen until then, slid parchment lists of spies who'd unmasked lords skimming taxes, fear polished pride into cooperation. On the 4th night, storms gathered over the neck. Thunderheads glowed red with sheet lightning that made swamp pools shimmer like molten mirrors. Envoys retired to tents unsettled by weather, too reminiscent of wars just ceased. Jon found Daenerys atop the gate tower, cloak snapping. Does the sky test us again? She asked. Sky's memory maybe, but we passed. He pointed to distant horizon where cracks between clouds revealed stars. It thunders to remind us what we escaped. She faced him fully. We forged counsel, but not yet trust. Some hearts clamor for crowns in secret. What if they tempt your inner flame to war again? He looked down at his palms. That fire sleeps. Even if woken, flame alone does nothing. It burned only because people feared darkness. He touched the stone parapet, rough and damp. I'd rather water gardens. She smiled. Small. Gardens need heat and water both. She stepped closer, sharing his warmth against wind, and gardeners to plant seed. In that moment he realized affection born of shared burdens had deepened into quiet dependency, the sort that asked nothing yet assumed presence. They did not speak of it, for naming new bonds too soon risked breaking them. Instead, she rested her head on his shoulder until rain began. Soft first, then Eddie, then sudden. Below, tents lit from within by candle shapes flickered like an encampment of glowworms. The lightning diminished. Somewhere a lute played a hesitant tune, Samuel Tarley's new apprentice minstrels practicing Ballad of the Dawnbearer, though Sam himself remained in Old Town rewriting histories, erased by maesters who mistrusted magic. The council ratified its charter on the 11th day. 73 wax seals pressed into it, lacking only House Boltons. Sir Benfred had slipped away during a hunt, leaving behind a tent, an empty wineskin, and a captured raven. Few mourned his absence, but all understood implication. Some men would never sign parchment when daggers still honed alternative futures. Yet parchment was a start. The High Steward chosen by lot, pulled from a velvet satchel by a blind septon, turned out to be Lord Giles Rosby, a man whose chronic cough seemed paradoxically immortal. The hall erupted into shocked laughter that dissolved tension tighter than any toast. That night, revels consumed the marshland keep. Cooks roasted 3 aurochs, 10 boars, and unknown quantities of eel pie. Northern ale met Dornish red in tankards, forging alliances faster than scribes could ink. John remained sober, opting to patrol ramparts with Ghost. He stopped once at a brazier to warm hands, pure habit now, for he no longer felt cold as before, yet still sought hearth out of remembered pleasure. The glowing coals drew him into half-meditation until footsteps approached. Sansa ... "You should join Feast," she said. Feasts after treaties often taste of onion and lye. Still better flavor than ashes. She regarded him under lamplight. "Tell me truth, John. Will this council hold?" "It will wobble." He shrugged. "But a wobbly table still bears bread." She laid a hand over his on the brazier rim. "You'll need allies beyond parchment. Marriage once bound realms stronger than ink." He stiffened. "I sacrificed crowns for peace, not to trade rings for leverage. I'm not speaking of politics." Her eyes glimmered kind but candid. "She looks at you with the hunger of someone who finally sees home." He withdrew slightly. "And I look like what?" "Like a man surprised to find himself alive enough to be loved." She squeezed his fingers. "Allow yourself surprise." Then she left before he could answer, leaving him with sparks swirling like tiny comets above the brazier. Morning arrived both bright and brittle. Envoys departed on diverging roads, promising return to Harrenhal come midsummer. The core party, Jon, Daenerys, Sansa, Arya, Davos, Tyrion, Gendry, Tormund, and Bran, rode north through Barrowlands toward Winterfell. Asha Greyjoy sailed round the Bight to rendezvous later. She grumbled of horses but respected tide schedules more than council timetables. 3 days from home, they camped among barrow mounds older than recorded song. The grassy domes scattered across a plain dotted with white flowers that opened only at dusk, each blossom glowing faintly, a natural phosphorescence folk called ghost roses. Children dared each other at night to pluck them, believing the petals formed lanterns for spirits beneath. Jon knew no spirit tonight wished harm. The air lay still, watchful, as though countless ancestors measured their heirs' choices. Around cookfire, Bran told stories of those ancestors, voice woven with wind. He spoke of the first king of the first men who carried bronze sword and ashwood shield, who met the children of forest beneath weirwood roots to carve the pact that birthed seasons as men understood them. He spoke of queens who guided migrations across shattered peninsula after the breaking. He spoke of lines that ended, and lines reborn through bastards who rose to valor. Each tale reminded companions they stepped on deep bones, their every footfall a verse in saga unending. Daenerys listened rapt, then asked Bran, "Do you see the future of dragons?" Bran's eyelids fluttered. "Dragons will sing again when sky darkens with machines unknown to maesters. Their riders will hold no crowns, but carry torches guiding worlds beyond oceans of stars." Tyrion chuckled. "Grand, but not terribly useful to our decade." Bran only smiled, the secretive smile of someone who had glimpsed tomorrow's jokes. Later, John walked among ghost roses. Each bloom released faint blue-silver luminescence. So the field looked like night sky duplicated at their feet. Daenerys followed, silent. They stopped on a mound where sword-shaped stone protruded. "I used to dream of dragons blazing over fields like this," she said. "I thought fire alone could carve justice." Her hands brushed petals that glowed on her fingertips. "Now I see gentler light just as strong." Jon knelt, palm over earth still warm from day's sun. "Gentle lights need guardians too." He looked up at her, feeling words form like shiver. "Sansa thinks I'm surprised that I can be loved. She's right. But surprise isn't fear. It could be invitation." Her eyebrows rose in quiet wonder. "You offer your heart so plainly." "I offer no crowns," he said. "Only north snows melting into good soil, and nights where stories sit beside fire instead of ghosts." Tears pricked her lashes, quick, unashamed. "I have chased thrones across half the world and lost brothers and children unborn to that chase. I would trade all my crowns for one steadiness." She touched his cheek. "If that is your invitation, I accept." He leaned in, and the kiss tasted of salt and cold air turned warm. Ghost roses brightened around them, tilting their petals like thousands of tiny lanterns blessing union. From behind another mound, Arya muttered to Gendry, "Took them long enough." Gendry hushed her with a grin broader than Blackwater Bay. Winterfell erupted into frenzy when the party returned. Saws shrilled, axes chopped, masons hammered flagstones to canted towers. But work paused as every eye pivoted to the courtyard where Jon and Daenerys rode side by side. Sansa announced engagement formally that evening. North and Dragonstone to join not for power, but for promise that differences temper strength. Servants cheered louder than knights, for rumors had spread that the match would abolish remaining levies, freeing fields from conscription for a generation. Preparations for a wedding commenced. Northern weddings typically spanned one night of ale, bread, and bed-sharing under witness trees. Targaryen ceremonies invoked ancient Valyrian oaths before dragon altars. Jon and Daenerys agreed to combine, vows spoken before Hearttree at dusk, then feast in the great hall where musicians would alternate northern reels with Kahoric harp songs. Tyrion drank twice his weight contemplating logistics. Davos wrote guest lists, large enough that Wintertown tents burgeoned like fairgrounds. Yet not all awaited union with joy. 2 nights before ceremony, a hooded figure approached Winterfell's postern gate. The guards recognized Benford Bolton too late. He thrust a dirk between one man's ribs, slashed another's throat, and vanished into shadow. At dawn they found the direwolf and dragon banner on rampart, defaced with streaks of crimson pig's blood forming a flayed wolf, beneath a dragon impaled upon a flensing knife. A note pinned with a crossbow bolt read, "North remembers cuts deeper than South forgives." Jon ordered extra watches. Daenerys advised capturing Bolton alive. Sansa dispatched ravens to every outlying garrison. But the night before vows, Benford made bolder attempt. He crept through crypt tunnels, guided by stolen maps. In each hand he carried a jar of wildfire, pilfered from some Lannister alley, intending to ignite the kings of winter beneath and collapse the keep's foundations, blotting Stark line in one stroke. What he hadn't anticipated was Bran sitting alone atop Ned Stark's sarcophagus, eyes white, ravens perched on shoulders. Benford froze. Bran's voice echoed though his lips barely moved. "Blood breeds blood, pain breeds pain. Lay your grief down." The Bolton hissed. "My house once ruled these dales. Stark stole our birthright with southern swords." He uncorked a jar. From shadows slipped Arya. Needle's point pressed just under his ear before he sensed movement. "Your house ruled by flaying children and wearing their hides," she whispered. "Birthright forfeited." Benford swung elbow, but she ducked. Jar flew. Shattering against cold stone, wildfire gurgled, but Bran raised one hand, and chill wind extinguished green sputters before they bloomed. A direwolf's growl echoed. Ghost stalked forward. Cornered, Benford drew a dagger etched with pink enamel. Arya parried, Swift, disarming him with flick. Bolton's favored cruelty, not finesse. He stumbled onto knees. Bran spoke again. Choose now. Kneel to life or bow to death. Ravens rustled wings like executioner hoods. Benford looked at shattered jar, at needled steel, at ghost-lit eyes behind him. Tears, hot with rage, spilled. He bashed forehead against stone floor thrice, smearing blood. I kneel to no ghosts. With sudden lunge, he plunged own throat onto dagger shard, gurgling curse. Arya shook head. He chose third path. Bran closed eyes, a sigh shivering crypt. Ravens flapped into darkness, extinguishing torchlight with rush of wings. Next dawn, a hush blanketed Winterfell. Jon learned of the attempted sabotage and Benford's death from Arya, while breaking fast on black bread and fish stew. Grief weighed heavier than anger. Another needless corpse when New World still in swaddle. He carried that weight to Godswood, where wedding would begin at dusk. The heart tree blossomed. Miracle bud Sansa nurtured with melt water and ash, from Ember King's cooled statue ground to fertilizer. Red leaves and white petals mixed, giving the tree an otherworldly blush. Jon knelt before it hours, letting silent weirwood whiten his mind. He asked of fathers, brothers, unknown gods whether this union invited more daggers, or finally dulled them. The wind answered in rustle like distant laughter, or tears. It could be both. Dusk arrived with storms threatened but withheld. Guests lined aisle between torches. Samwell arrived last minute, via raven-flown litter. Cheeks ruddy from aerial terror, dropping volumes of ancient rites in snow as he hurried. He officiated beside Bran, who recited old tongue words none truly understood but felt. Daenerys wore gown of winter silk woven by Manderly seamstresses, white shading to crimson at hem, scaled patterns subtle as ripples. Instead of crown, a single ghost rose nestled in her hair. Jon wore black surcoat embroidered with silver direwolf, and faint red thread swirling like dragon wing behind. They clasped hands before Hearttree. Samwell asked them, "Speak names." "Jon Snow," he said, voice firm. "Of House Stark and none, of no crown and every hearth. I vow warmth in winter and quiet in storm." "Daenerys," she said. "Stormborn no longer, for storms yield. I vow mercy to strength and flight to stillness." They exchanged dragonbone rings carved by Gendry, twin torches crossing. Bran bound wrists with strip of blue silk once part of Ned's cloak. Sansa sprinkled petals. Tyrion toasted. Feast followed. Musicians played until tables shook. Tormund challenged Unsullied to mead contest and lost spectacularly, delighting him. Asha Greyjoy swapped war stories with Lady Barbary Dustin, both laughing too loud. Davos danced clumsily with Shireen's memory guiding steps. Ghost lay near hearth content. Amid revelry, Daenerys pulled Jon toward balcony overlooking courtyard. Snowmelt trickled along gutters in quiet music. Torches below formed pattern like constellations. She rested head on his chest. "Tomorrow." She whispered, "We begin harder work. Governing without crowns." He kissed her hair. "And loving without prophecy." Midnight bells pealed. Bells Gendry had forged from Valyrian steel shards, tempered in Ember King's extinct fire. Their tone deep, resonant with world's new chord. The sound washed across Wintertown, drifting over forests, rivers, moor, until even the shattered walls seemed to tremble. Farmers paused in sleep, sensing change. Newborn calves stirred. Distant Crannock folk lifted heads as if hearing name long forgotten. Balance hummed inside that note. Spring lengthened into summer lush beyond living memory. Wheat in crownlands grew a foot higher than plow hands expected. The arbor reported grapevines bursting. Even Iron Island's cliffs sprouted stubborn shrubs. Harrenhal's reconstruction advanced at miraculous pace, as if stone wished to redeem its cursed story. Scholars in Old Town wrote treatises attributing meteorological shift to axial wobble, But common folk credited the dawn-bearer, if less as god, more as gardener. Yet prosperity did not erase every shadow. In lands ravaged by war, mercenaries turned bandit. In Slaver's Bay, old masters plotted behind trade consortiums. In Far East Carcosa, omen priests dreamed of a comet-splitting sky, interpreting a sign to summon horrors that fed on memory. Trouble, like grass, always found cracks. Jon and Daenerys faced each dawn with council meetings, road-building projects, disputes between fishermen over eel traps, letters from High Steward Rosby coughing apologies for late tax shipments. Their residence alternated between Winterfell and Dragonstone, now linked by fast courier ships, Gendry refitted with new lantine sails. Between duties, they walked fields, inspecting irrigation ditches Sansa's engineers devised. Sometimes they argued, over grain tariffs, over unsullied garrisons at Lannisport, over whose turn to read to Bran old maps. But their quarrels never sharpened to blades. They learned to let silences cool heat. One evening, months after wedding, they stood on Winterfell's ramparts watching northern lights flare, rare in summer but not unseen. The sky shimmered greens and violets that mirrored ghost roses now cultivated in Winterfell gardens. Jon held a parchment from Eastwatch. Wildlings sighted a ship of black iron drifting south from frozen straits, no flag flown, hull spiked with rust and shapes like screaming faces carved prow. A remnant of something older than kingdoms. Another ghost from beyond maps, he said. Daenerys traced the sketched prow. If there are still ships in ice, there are still stories waiting teeth. But we are not alone this time. He smiled, slid arm around her. Council will sail if needed. She laughed softly. Imagine Tyrion on open sea again. Hell turn green, but he'll come. Above them Aurora folded like dragon wings. Below, Winterfell's forge hammered late. Blades, yes, but also plowshares and hinges for school doors, because children flooded new lessons Bran designed. Arithmetic shaped by raven flight patterns, history told by ashes and petals, stories woven of ice and fire now balanced. Jon thought of Melisandre, ember returned to wind, of Night King's corpse snow carried to seas, of Ember King's obsidian shell cracked in Valyrian cavern. He felt weight, but not burden. Rather, responsibility tempered by partnership. He squeezed Daenerys' hand. We ended winter, he murmured, and cooled the flame. Now the world's task is to live between them. She rested head on his shoulder. Then let's begin with sunrise. And when dawn finally lifted, it found two silhouettes atop gray walls washed gold. Their shadows long across courtyard stones, where boys raced wooden swords, without fear of endless night, nor a scourge of fire, shouting legends that no longer belong to one hero, but to every heart willing to guard the fragile music of balance. K-Ain? A copper dawn unfurled across Winterfell like a slow bleeding wound on pale cloth, but the air that greeted the keep's ramparts tasted of honeyed clover, not iron or smoke. Jon Snow watched the light seep through clouds thin as gauze and tried to savor its easy warmth. Summer mornings were still new to him. Strange creatures of cricket chirr and dew-sweet wind instead of the brittle hush that had once ruled these stones. And he cherished each one the way a reformed soldier fingers an old scar in quiet gratitude. Yet with the letter from Eastwatch tucked inside his sleeve, gratitude wore edges sharp enough to draw blood. The black iron hulk had appeared at the northern horizon 3 nights past, drifting under ragged sails stitched from mottled hides. Ravens claimed its prow bore a leering face molded of rusted plates, and its keel carved a wake of slush so cold it refroze the sea behind it. The garrison had sounded horns meant for storms, and the wildlings who still manned watchposts, in exchange for steady meals, whispered in guttural low tongue that the ship was a relic of the dead men's fleet. An armada the others had once intended to launch across every freezing sea. Jon suspected superstition, but he also knew superstition had kept many a spear in shaking hands long enough for morning sunlight to scatter nightmare. He could not ignore an omen shaped in iron. He turned at the soft pad of footsteps. Daenerys approached wrapped in a cloak the color of dusk-stained milk. Since their wedding she favored northern fabrics over silks, though she insisted on Valyrian cuts that left her arms free and her stride unhampered. In the thin light she seemed carved from mother of pearl, all quiet curves and half-hidden strength. A single ghost rose braided behind her ear winked silver blue when it caught the sun. "You're awake before the maester's bell," she observed, voice low, so as not to rouse the outer ward still dozing. "Couldn't sleep," he answered. He tapped the envelope in his sleeve. "News makes a pillow hard." She joined him at the crenellation, eyes following the slow spill of light across rooftops. "Another letter from Eastwatch. I know that look. The ship's closer." By dusk yesterday it had reached the Shivering Strait. No sails, no oars, just moving. He exhaled. "The garrison wants orders." Daenerys tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. "We'll answer from the deck of the Silverwing. Gendry says she's ready to sail." Jon tensed. "You mean to meet it at sea?" "I mean to see it with my own eyes before panic festers. Half the realm still fears shadows that no longer rule them. We can't let rumor raise them once more." She laid a hand upon his wrist. "We'll go together. We've faced worse ships." The memory of smoke, salt, and rotting timbers at Hardhome flickered between them. Jon blew out a breath. Together. Namdwa. They descended to the great hall where dawn preparations hummed. Bakers sliding rounds of oat bread into clay ovens, stable hands rubbing frost from saddle buckles, ravens croaking for feed. Sansa already waited at the long table, parchment spread before her like battle maps. She looked up, amber hair catching lamplight. "Tell me it's not bad enough to postpone the harvest conference," she said by way of greeting. A dozen Riverland and Reachman delegates were due in a fortnight to plan grain shipments south. A single ship could capsize more than waves if it carried plague or sorcery. "We won't know until we reach it," Jon said, lifting a mug of small ale. "We sail within the hour." Sansa's expression tightened, but she merely nodded. "Take Davos and half the Grey Shield's Marines. Tormund is already chewing Marshall's ears for a chance to tug on its anchor chain, so bring him as well. And," she paused, "take Bran." Jon frowned. "Bran can't cross decks safely. And if the hull is cursed." "He's seen pieces of it in his dreams," she interrupted, tone iron light. "He woke screaming, Black Mouse 2 nights ago. Then he asked if you'd need a helm of weirwood. Whatever that means, he should be near enough to look again." Jon conceded the point, though dread gnawed at his stomach. Bran's visions were rarely gentle, and rarer still kind. They gathered party swiftly. Davos clucking at sloppily rolled map scrolls. Tormund whooping that he'd wrestled the ship into submission. Tyrion insisting on joining because dead fleets make better books than grapes. And Gendry's smith-sinewed sailors lugging crates of chain and grappling hooks. Bran was carried in a wicker litter padded thick with furs. Ravens settled along its rim like crown jewels alive with restless eyes. His own eyes were already glazed milk, spooling through unseen currents. By mid-morning the Silverwing, a lean, newly copper-clad carrack, cut down the white knife under full canvas. Summer sun gilded the marshes. Frogs plopped from reed banks. Herons ogled the wake with offended dignity. Jon felt the familiar tension of a man leaving walls, had only just learned to trust. Daenerys stood at the bow, hair whipping behind her. The smell of brine filled the gaps between his ribs that dread had hollowed, and strangely it soothed him. There was certainty in salt water. It drowned fear or carried it to shore, but never left it hovering. 2 days later the sea turned gray-green, and the breeze sharpened. The crew sighted ice floes even though it was only midsummer. None bore more than a sheen the size of a smithy's floor, yet they hinted at colder breath ahead. Davos scanned skies where seabirds once darted and found only empty air. No gull would follow that cold hunger. Near twilight, the lookout cried out. On the horizon rose a shape, no larger than a splinter at first, but unmistakably wrong. Shipmasts normally climb vertical. These leaned like cracked ribs, and their sails, or skins, hung slack, though wind whipped the Silverwing's banners stiff enough to snap threads. As the distance dwindled, smell preceded sight. a rank sweetness, like meat left too long in sun and then drowned. The sailors murmured prayers to 7 gods, to the many-faced, even to the old lion of Volantis. John gripped Longclaw's pommel through its wrap. The hilt felt cool. The fire that once danced inside him did not wake, but it stirred, curious. They slowed within bowshot. No crew appeared along the stranger's rail. Its hull was wrought of plates hammered into semblance of huge overlapping jaws, each man-height tooth a wedge of pocked steel. Cracks oozed brackish tears. A single banner sagged from a spar. Black cloth, emblazoned not with sigil, but with a spiraled void stitched in tarnished silver thread. Bran's ravens shrieked in unison. Tormund spat over the gunwale. "Looks like something coughed up by a rock-chewing ice worm. Or built to be swallowed by one," Tyrion muttered, quill scratching. Jon hailed across the water. His voice came back hollow, absorbed by yawning iron mouths. He turned to Bran, who sat propped by Davos near the mizzen. The boy's breath steamed in unnatural puffs. "What do you see?" Bran's eyes rolled white until only brittle red veins showed, then focused impossibly far. "It is called Nath En Case, the Night's Maw," he whispered, in a language half First Tongue, half Valyrian. Forged when the others learned they might need oceans. Never crewed by living hands. His pupils dilated. "It eats memory." Jon's scalp prickled. "Memory? Those who step aboard will forget themselves, piece by piece, until Will melts into black water." Bran's face twisted in sorrow. It sailed once, centuries ago, but was driven back by Valyrian fire and drowned faith. Now the sea has thawed, and it drifts again. Daenerys' knuckles whitened on the rail. "Can fire still stop it?" "Fire alone, no," Bran breathed. "But flame intertwined with roots of old green, perhaps." Gendry cleared his throat. "Roots aren't much use in salt water." Jon weighed choices. They could retreat, warn the coast, risk the thing drifting into shipping lanes, or board, confront sorcery inside. Ghost, restless in the hold, let out a muffled whine as though sensing the verdict already forging in Yon's gut. He turned to the crew. "We board. Anchor within grappling range. Helm stays manned. If we fail, burn it from stern to prow and ram." Dread rippled, but orders were orders. Grapples shot, chains clanged, and the Silverwing reeled the corpse ship close enough for boarding planks. Daenerys insisted on leading with him. She donned a breastplate Gendry had inlaid with ghost rose scales. Tyrion followed, muttering that someone must chronicle heroic idiocy firsthand. Davos and a squad of Marines came next. Tormund, already singing bawdy war hymns, swung across on a rope like a ginger cannonball. Jon stepped onto the unfamiliar deck. The iron beneath looked swollen, as if hammered while still molten and never quite cooled. Each footfall produced a muffled gong, dull and wet. No rigging creaked. Ropes were sinews, tight and slick. A rust-feathered raven landed on a crossbeam overhead, opened its beak, and cried a note that sounded like cracking ice, then flew away as though disgusted. "Stay close," Jon ordered. They advanced amid towers of cargo cages welded shut, their slats crisscrossing into crude sigils. Inside lay nothing. Vacant space pressed Jon's mind like a distant shout he couldn't hear. He peered into one cell and saw flickers. Moments of laughter with Robb. Arya's daredevil grin. Ygritte's final teary curse, flitting across the darkness, then evaporating. He staggered back. Daenerys grasped his elbow. Her eyes were wide. "I saw it too. My brother's golden crown. My son," she inhaled, grounding herself. "It shows but steals." "Onward," Jon said, voice rough. They reached the main hatch, an oval maw lined with jagged teeth. Chains hung like anchored tongues. Inside, black water sloshed in a pit 30 feet across. Black, not by lack of light, but by depthless hue that absorbed every candle flame the Marines carried. On a dais above the pool sat a throne grown from fused swords. Unlike the Iron Throne's sprawl, this one curved inward, cradling absence. And absence looked back. A figure of pitch rose, shaped like a man but faceless, edges bleeding smoke. It spoke without sound, words sliding straight into bone. Return light. Keep peace. Feed me you. John's pulse hammered. Longclaw slid free, steel glimmering. You will return to the deep or burn. Fire forgets. The shape gestured. The water rippled up into tendrils that brushed John's boots. Immediate chill crept along his soles into calves. Memories flashed, flickered, ghost bounding as a pup. The first time he held a bastard sword, laughter with Sam on the wall, and ebbed threatening to wash out. Daenerys stepped beside him, flames bursting down her forearms where she had slit the lining of her gauntlets to reveal dragon-glass threads. Heat rolled, a gentle hearth warmth, but the tendrils recoiled as if stung. Yet for every retreat, another snaked farther round. Bran's litter was carried to Hatch Edge by Marines. Ravens swooped overhead like storm cloud fractals. Bran's voice rang clear, echoing inside skulls rather than air. Bind root to ember, leaf to spark. Ravens dived, dropping ghost rose seeds into the black. Where seeds touched, ripples froze, turned silver, sprouted luminous stems that hissed as they grew. The black water writhed, unable to absorb living light. Jon felt the fire inside him flare. Honed now, no longer pyre wildfire but candle given purpose. He plunged Longclaw's tip through silver stem into darkness. A roar like mountains grinding shook the hull. The pitch figure lunged. Daenerys met it, her arms whirling arcs of incandescent ash that left ribbons across its void. Each ribbon filled with scenes. Children learning letters in Harrenhal's new school. Free folk trading furs for iron plows. Men and women planting ghost roses along a new king's road. The void screamed as hope invaded it. Tormund leapt from a gunwale to tackle its flank. His axe bit tore the nothingness, scattering motes. Davos hurled a jar of lamp oil. Tyrion flicked a torch that caught the oil and blossomed orange. The faceless form collapsed inward, the throne behind it melting into slag that dribbled like tears. As it sank, the pit began to churn violently, vomiting black waves against hull. But each wave curled around silver stems and dissipated into steam that smelled of rain on cedar. Jon dragged Daenerys back as vines of ghost rose knitted across the opening, sealing the abyss. Light-bold leaves cast glow brighter than noon. In that white glare Jon saw brand new memories arching across his mind, future laughter of a child yet unborn. Bran's smile at first snow, of a gentle winter. Sansa's gray hair as she presided over a midsummer festival. He gasped with wonder and grief intermingled, because to see a thing was never the same as to reach it. Silence fell. The hull groaned, but it was the groan of ice thawing under warm river, not the groan of vengeance. The ship drifted listless. Tyrion's voice broke the hush. If anyone is considering salvage rights, I decline. A weak laugh traveled the deck. Relief tasted like mead. They withdrew to the Silver Wing with vines still glowing in the maw's broken cradle. Bran's ravens circled once, then landed on railings of both vessels, connecting them with living chain of feathers. The corpse ship's banner sagged, then fluttered as if exhaling. Threads of silver unwove themselves and scattered into foam. Joining the sea. Back aboard, Bran spoke aloud at last. Sea remembers, but it cannot dream what has no shape. We gave it new song. It will carry petals, not screams, to every shore the current knows. Jon knelt before his brother. Will it threaten again? The maw sleeps, bound by root and ember, unless men fuel it with fear. Bran's eyes cleared, calm. Guard hearts, and it remains dreamless. They set the corpse ship ablaze anyway, to be certain. Pitch smoked. Iron teeth cracked. Ghost rose vines twined through flame, refusing to burn, instead glowing hotter until hull plates burst, scattering molten starbursts across ice floes that hissed and vanished. The journey home felt shorter. Ocean swells hissed friendly foam. Gulls returned as though released from vow of silence. Tormund invented ballads about Jon Emberseed and Queen Fireflower, until Davos threatened to gag him with cod. Tyrion sketched an emblem combining Ghost Rose and Torch that he claimed would grace a new fleet tasked with patrolling Elder Ice. Daenerys stood beside Jon at the bow each dusk, their fingers entwined. On the third night, she placed his palm against her stomach. A tiny flutter answered his touch. Not a kick, too early yet, but a stirring no less miraculous. "I felt it yesterday," she said, voice a silk thread. "I wanted you to share." Speech abandoned him like startled birds. He pressed forehead to hers, breathing the single word that mattered. Hope. When they reached White Harbor, the city erupted in cheers at sight of them alive. News traveled faster than sails. Some sailor claimed to have seen the black ships fire from 10 leagues. Sansa met them at the dock with Gendry and a half-dozen scribes. She hugged Jon first, then Daenerys long and tight, whispering blessings old as Winter King's. Bran's litter was set upon the pier. Ravens scattered into the morning sun, cawing triumph. Council convened the next day in Winterfell's refurbished solar. Lords and envoys listened as Tyrion recounted the tale, a tale so absurd it could only be true. Edric Storm blanched. Lady Asha muttered curses at seas that birthed nightmares. Prince Quentyn quietly penciled Ghost Rose patterns onto the corner of a parchment treaty draft. They voted unanimous funding for the Northern Patrol Fleet. Gendry was named Sea Warden of the New Dawn, a title that made him flush redder than forge coals. Summer unfurled. The first harvest under new charter exceeded expectation by half-haul. Grain ships flowed south, bringing coin north at rebuilt roads and libraries. The maesters in Old Town, confronted with Ghost Rose seeds that glowed even in candlelit lecture halls, reopened dusty tomes of forbidden sorcery to study living memory. They invited Bran to sit at conclave. Ravens perched upon starry spire roofs for the first time in centuries. Jon and Daenerys journeyed realm to realm, accepting no thrones but plenty of feasts. In the Stormlands, they blessed a newborn named Lyanna Rhaella. On the Arbor, they planted a Ghost Rose vine in Lady Olenna's honor. In Lannisport, they met bands of former Sellswords who now paved streets instead of looting them. Tyrion discreetly paid their wages a month ahead, remembering other Sellswords with less cost to change. In Dorne, they walked water gardens at night, Daenerys barefoot on cool tiles while Jon marveled at fountains lit by lanternfish harvested along jade sea routes newly reopened. They returned north as leaves began to bronze. At Moat Cailin, Bran received them under an arch draped in ivy. His eyes, when they focused on Jon, held secret mischief. He spoke privately after supper. Ravens clustered like black fruit above his chair. "The child you await," he said, "will carry neither ice alone nor fire, but dawn across palm lines. Guard them, brother." Jon felt heat bloom in his chest as if Ember King's flame had found a gentle echo. This fire did not burn but warmed like family hearth. Months later, deep in night, Daenerys' cries pierced Winterfell's quiet. Sansa and the midwives tended while Jon paced, Longclaw forgotten against a wall. Snow fell outside, the season's first. Flakes caught torchlight like drifting diamonds. When the wail of new life at last joined wind's whistle, Jon's knees almost gave. Daenerys beckoned him. She looked exhausted yet fiercer than he had ever seen. Damp hair curling, skin radiant with exertion's glow. "A girl," she whispered. "Asha Nymeria Snow, if that pleases you." "It pleases me," he choked. He held the infant. Her eyes had not settled on color, but already they seemed to hold starlight. Tiny fingers clenched his thumb with astonishing strength. In that grip he felt valleys yet to be tilled, songs yet to be sung, and winters that would come gentle. Not absent, for absence breeds forgetfulness, but softened by memory of balance. Ghost roses bloomed in the courtyard even beneath light snow. Their petals glimmered faintly, breathed memory into crisp air. Jon imagined those petals drifting outward on winds, carrying stories to corners of worlds still haunted by silence. The tales would twist. Hearts would ache. Men would hunger, but somewhere a child could pluck a glowing flower and remember that ice had once thawed because strangers made themselves kin. He kissed Daenerys' forehead, then the child's, tasting salt and promise. Outside, dawn approached, a slow, rosy unfurl across cloud banks. He realized dawn no longer felt like a victory stolen from darkness, but instead a conversation between sky and earth. Each would have their turn, and the world would live in the listening. When the first ray crept through shutters and painted Asha's cheek, her eyes opened. They reflected the new sun's gold and the lingering moon's silver at once. Jon laughed softly, tears catching in beard. "Hello, little Balance," he murmured. And far beyond, in places where Ghost Rose seeds had already rooted, across the shattered Valyrian peninsula, atop the Dreadfort's lonely ramparts now under new lordship, sworn to peace, along fisher huts dotting the lonely light, petals answered dawn, glowing faint, pulsing like quiet hearts. Memory, once devoured by night's maw, now fed the living. The wall's fissures gleamed under sunrise. They would eventually crumble, rebuilt not as prison but as monument. Stones would bear carvings of wolves and dragons entwined, torches crossing. Travelers would pause, run hands across runes, and feel warmth linger. They would tell their children that two halved worlds met and decided wholeness tasted sweeter. In the great hall later that day, Jon gathered friends, Tormund limp from celebratory mead, Davos smiling soft fatherly pride, Tyrion scribbling possible royal genealogies, though none here were royalty. Bran silent but seeing, and lifted Asha high. No pomp, no crown. Only a circle of varied souls forged by terror, tempered by hope. Cheers rang against rafters carved with direwolves and ghost roses intertwining. He looked at Daenerys beside him. Light caught her eyes, no longer haunted violet, but clear lavender ringed with sunrise. They needed no words. The hush between heartbeats said enough. Battle would come again, because life without struggle stagnates, but they had given the realm a rhythm to meet those storms. Fire would temper steel without raising fields. Ice would cool hot anger without freezing rivers. And memory would sing, so that hunger for oblivion found no echo. That night, after good wine and exhausted laughter, Jon climbed the ramparts alone. The sky overhead stretched jeweled black. He traced constellations Bran had named for New Age, the Balance, the Emberstem, the Derwing. Down in the courtyard, Asha slept in cradle by hearth, Daenerys nearby. Ghost kept watch, tail thumping. Jon breathed cold air, sharp with promise. No distant horns sounded, no shadows stalked, only steady wind. He closed his eyes, recalling time when he feared dawn might never return. Now dawn had a face, a name, a future stitching itself one breath at a time. He spoke into starlight, not prayer, but vow. I will guard this fragile middle. I will remember. Below, ghost roses swayed, petals shimmering silver blue. Their glow did not banish darkness. It simply made darkness honest, revealed its shape. And that was enough for a world reborn, not in perfect light, but in brave twilight where every soul might plant seed, tend flame, and remember who they could become when neither frost nor fire claimed supremacy, only the shared warmth between. So summer marched toward harvest, and winter prepared its softer return. And somewhere in the endless turning, a new story began, quiet, ordinary, wondrous. A.K. Oh. The year after Asha Nymeria's birth flowed like honey poured over frost. Slow, deceptively sweet, and always at risk of hardening if the air turned sharp. Jon woke most mornings before the keep's bells tolled, not because the babe cried. Asha slept with the solemn determination of a night's watch sentinel, but because his body, conditioned by years of patrols and wars and unnatural resurrections, insisted that dawn was never safe unless someone watched it arrive. He would lift her from her cradle by the hearth and pace the still dark solar, feeling the fragile warmth of her cheek against his collarbone, while the castle's great fires guttered and whispered as if keeping their own vigil. Asha's eyes settled between gray and violet, a color Jon could find no name for, and her hair came in a soft fuzz of silvered brown like new willow bark. The maester declared her lungs strong and her heart sound. By the time leaves reddened, she could push herself to sitting, surveying the world with solemnity that made even Tormund tread soft as a magi in her presence. Once Jon caught the wildling giant crooning a lullaby in Old Tongue, a tune about ice bears and moonlight, while bouncing Asha gently on one knee. When Jon raised a brow, Tormund threw back his head and boomed. Even giants start small, Crow King, then blushed because he had called the Dawnbearer a king again. Castle life had never been quieter. Ghost roses trimmed every window ledge, their glow faint in daylight, but bright enough at dusk to guide servants through corridors without torches. Potters from the Reach fashioned delicate oil lamps in the shape of those flowers. Winter townsfolk placed them at doorsteps every 6th night, saying it kept nightmares timid. Sansa had half the realm's wagons rumbling with grain to feed coastal villages, still rebuilding from skirmishes with corsairs, while Davos oversaw construction of a stone lighthouse at the mouth of the White Knife, topped by a brazier fueled by smokeless ghost rose oil. Tyrion spent entire evenings bent over maps, plotting trade routes around the Shivering Strait to carry northern furs and Dornish citrus back and forth faster than ravens. Yet, change seeded unease. Brave twilight was not so easily defined. Monsters retreated, but did not vanish. One crisp evening, as Jon rode patrol along the New King's Road south of Moat Cailin, his sister's guards insisted on calling it the Dawn Road. Though he objected to such flattery, he found a peddler caravan halted where the path narrowed between two barrow mounds. The traders stood in silence, cloaks drawn tight despite mild weather, their led horse stamping nervously. Jon dismounted, bidding his escort hang back, and approached. "What bars your wheels?" he asked the eldest woman, who wore a necklace of colorful beads likely carved from bits of temple marble in Volantis. She motioned at the eastern mound. "Voices from Earth, sir, my lord." She corrected herself mid-word when she recognized the direwolf embroidery on his glove, the sword at his side. "They called last night, as the moon set. Said they wanted fire." Nemem Sawal. Jon glanced at the slope. Grass rolled smooth, unbroken except for a cluster of ghost roses sprouting near the crest. Their petals glowed an angry amber in pre-dusk gloom, not the usual blue-white. He unbuckled Longclaw and left it with his horse, startling the traders. Then he climbed the mound slowly. Wind shifted. Somewhere a raven croaked thrice. Near the top an opening yawned where no opening had been, as if sod had peeled back like shorn hide. A shaft of stale air blew out, smelling of clay and old parchment. Jon knelt and listened. A sound drifted up, rustling, scraping. Words but not words. Syllables broken and rearranged. He heard fragments. Man, wood, iron, scorch. Then his own name, twisted as Jan and Jan. He stood and stepped back until his boots met firm soil again. Davos had taught him that fear made sailors superstitious. Bran had taught him that some superstitions kept truth from devouring sense. He told the traders they could pass once his men sealed the hole. He posted 2 scouts to watch the mound until he returned with maesters and runesmiths from Barrowton specializing in graves older than wheat. 3 days later, the scholars arrived and discovered shattered tablets of etched obsidian lining, a tunnel dropping arrow straight into bedrock. The marks resembled the sigil on the Maw's black banner, a spiral void. No bones, no rusted weapons, nothing else. The crypt had dug itself. Jon carried that puzzle back to Winterfell like a stone in his boot. He shared every detail with Daenerys one night after Asha had drifted to dreams. They sat in the solar lit only by ghost rose lamps and a single brazier. The latter warmed Daenerys' ankles, which still sometimes ached from frostbite, earned long ago in the march to Eastwatch. "Spirals again," she sighed, combing her fingers through his hair where silver now threaded black more generously. "The dead leave a sign even after death. Ice or iron, they yearn to be remembered. That barrow was untouched for thousands of years. Why open now? Because something listens when balance shifts," she said. "We broke eternal winter, quelled eternal flame. The world may wonder what eternal truth remains. Perhaps memory seeks anchor, even if that memory is void. Then so. John studied the ghost rose flame. Or someone digs old tombs to spread fear. Both can be true. She rose to pour mulled wine. Let me ride south with you next. I can't sit here nursing peace while you chase whispers. He did not argue, though part of him wanted to keep her far from any new Maud. He knew she would go regardless. They left Asha under Sansa and Arya's protection, an arrangement that spurred half-jesting threats to any who dared disturb Winterfell. Bran whispered to Asha the night before departure, brow touching hers, and ravens perched on cot rafters cooed low lullabies. The castle's hearts beat as one knot. Jon felt the tug unspool thread by thread as he and Daenerys rode down the lane, beneath a sunrise that blazed red gold as seared leather. Their escort consisted of Tormund, Gendry, a dozen Dawn Guard, the newly christened unit of volunteers from every realm trained under Vale Knights and free folk trackers, and Tyrion, who refused to remain behind because he claimed someone needed to ensure the chronicling of whatever fool things they attempted next. He had also sworn to watch Gendry's back should the blacksmith grow reckless around ancient stone, though everyone suspected Tyrion merely pined for fresh material to turn into tavern stories at Harrenhal's next assembly. As they traveled deeper into the barrow-rich plains, they discovered more disturbances. Little sinkholes in the turf, emitting wisps of cold vapor, ghost rose clusters, changing color from white to pale green and back again. And once a weeping tree whose sap glowed like starlight. None of it felt hostile, simply unquiet, as if echoes of all those who had fallen to ice, fire, and misery now shivered beneath the world's new silence. By dusk of the 10th day, they reached Lake Longmere. The once snow-mantled basin shimmered under a mild evening breeze. Fish thronged in reeds, churning water silver. On an island near the center, a lone stone ring jutted, 6 menhirs blackened by unknown heat. Scouts reported twin cave mouths at its base, and carvings eroded enough to mask origin. Jon ordered camp on the shore. He, Daenerys, Tyrion, and Tormund crossed the lake in a flat-bottomed skiff rowed by Gendry under bulging clouds pierced by golden light. The island soil crunched like broken glass. On closer look, the menhirs weren't blackened. They were fused glass, as if lightning had melted rock from within. Tyrion tapped a rod to one pillar. It thrummed, producing a note low enough Jon felt it in his bones. Daenerys traced a finger over a swirl spiraling into a fork like a tree branch, or a vein. Targaryen glass candles can sing like that if tapped, she said. Tormund huffed. Pretty candles never kept an ice bear from chewing your leg. Gendry slid Longclaw from Jon's belt, holding it out while he knelt to inspect the soil. Jon accepted sword but kept point downward, wary. Gendry sifted ash-fine dust through his fingers. Buried charcoal, he murmured. Smells of brimstone still. Night fell swift. Stars kindled overhead, and as they did, the menhir glass began to pulse faintly. Tyrion struck flint and lit a lantern. The flame dimmed, swallowed by surrounding glow. Daenerys' breath steamed though the air was warm. She laid a palm on her stomach in instinct, though Asha was safe leagues away. Jon turned his face to the stars. They spun. No, not stars, but motes within the glass pillars, moving in synchrony. He heard Bran whisper in memory. Machines unknown to maesters. Were these machines tools? Or simple graves refusing to rest? A sound rolled from the caves. Not wind, not animal. A grinding, like something vast adjusting its weight after sleep. Jon strode toward the nearest mouth. Daenerys matched him. Tyrion muttered curses but followed, Tormund and Gendry flanking them. Inside, the passage sloped downward into phosphorescent gloom. Walls, once natural stone, melted into smooth black where molten glass had flowed. The floor bore grooves chiseled with sigils half familiar from Valyrian tablets and half from children's runes. At intervals, niches held smooth orbs, dull as extinguished embers. Jon touched one and recoiled. Cold seeped into bones, dragging remembrance of Hardhome's silence, the choke of snow inside lungs. But when Daenerys placed a fingertip to the orb, it pulsed ruddy, warmer, as if tasting her fire. Light flared along the corridor ahead, pillars activating sequentially until the chamber beyond illuminated. They entered a rotunda whose ceiling soared beyond torch reach, a dome, etched with raven silhouettes, deerwolves, wyverns, all swirling around a central motif. 2 torches crossed above a sleeping face, the flame tips touching. Jon shivered. That symbol had been born the council, the dream of balance. How had it etched itself in glass that predated their rule by millennia? Tyrion exhaled. Either history is rewriting itself in real time, or someone's been carving without our knowledge. A shape in the center of floor uncoiled. What at first seemed a pile of slag lifted a head, stone, flesh, and eyes ignited pale green. The creature resembled a man wrought of obsidian lattice, joints glowing. It spoke in a language like wind across frozen leaves. Daenerys raised a hand, uttered an answer in halting old Valyrian. The figure tilted its head, eyes brightening. It spoke again. Slower. Tyrion scribbled phonetics. Jon recognized one term repeated. Zoan, older even than Valyrian, meaning keeper or steward. It calls itself Varen, Daenerys said softly. Says it waited for the bridge. Jon tightened grip on Longclaw. What bridge? Tyrion looked up from writing. The bridge between memory and time, or between breath and stone. Valyrian is annoyingly poetic. The creature turned to Jon, voice echoing through chamber bones. Daenerys translated. You carry dawn. It must anchor the weave. Tormund spat. Can someone anchor weave around me barrel first? Gendry rumbled agreement, but Jon stepped forward. He sensed no malice, only intent older than crown or council. Ask it why graves open. Daenerys posed the question. Varen answered with a phrase that reverberated off walls. Ix, Agan, Pundamite. Tyrion's cheeks paled. Means sprung coil or freed lock, he said. As if something sealed is undone. Jon sheathed Longclaw. What can reseal it? Varen kneeled, if such a creature could kneel, and extended a palm. In its grasp formed a shard of glass, shaped like ghost rose petal, yet hard as dragonfang. Light danced inside. Daenerys approached and accepted the shard, gasping as it warmed. The creature spoke another word. Soul key, Daenerys murmured. Only the root of flame and frost grown in living flesh can turn it. Jon realized then this task would not be finished with swords or treaties, but with something far more intimate. Their child. Asha herself was dawn anchor, Bran had hinted, yet she was months old. The soul key radiated potential like a seed. Return to Winterfell, plant it, guard it, let it bloom. They backed from the chamber carefully. Varen remained kneeling, eyes dimming. Once outside caverns, the glass pillars lost their pulse. The island hushed. Above, clouds parted to reveal the comet that had once heralded dragons. It flashed, but not red. Pale gold, matching dawn. They returned to camp, where Tyrion drew diagrams by firelight. Tormund and Gendry argued about whether to smash or hug any future stone men. Jon hardly heard. His mind drifted to Winterfell, to Cradle, to the tiny bundle of promise he had left behind. It felt like leaving a torch in a sea cave and trusting waves not to drown it. They rowed hard north. Along the way, spectral phenomena increased. Ghost roses bloomed in daylight, larks sang at midnight. Once an entire glade of weirwood saplings appeared where none had stood days before. People took these wonders as blessings or omens, depending on their nature. A few, particularly Septons loyal to the faith militant who still resented northern peculiarities, claimed witchcraft and urged King's Landing to ban ghost rose cultivation. But Edric Storm, maturing into calm authority, deflected such protests, reminding the faith that miracle and heresy often shared roots and needed pruning of patience. When Jon's party reached Winterfell, Bran met them at gate in his chair, ravens raucous overhead. His lips curved faintly when he saw the shard in Daenerys' gloved hand. Bloom it in water from Black Lake, he advised, beneath the sky's reflection. And sing. Sing what? Jon asked. Whatever hearts remember. They did as told, filled a silver basin with lake water, placed the shard within, then stood around with Sansa, Arya, Davos, half the staff, and at Bran's insistence, old Nan, who had refused to die and still scolded scullery maids with relish. Daenerys began a lullaby from her childhood. Soft Valyrian verse about seashells and dragon dreams. Jon joined with a northern cradle song. Sansa wove in a lay of the maiden. Soon servants hummed, the sound modest but rich. The shard glowed, melted into water, spiraled outward like ink, then upward in tendril of golden mist. It banked through the air, drifted toward Asha sleeping on Daenerys' shoulder, and settled on her brow as dew-water. The baby stirred, opened eyes. For a moment, those eyes mirrored the shard's light, dawn and dusk swirling. And then the glow faded, leaving her gaze unchanged but deeper somehow, as if she had seen an entire lifetime in the span of a breath. She gurgled, content. That night Jon stood watch atop the highest tower. Winterfell dozed below in patchwork of lamplight and ghost rose glimmer. Beside him Daenerys cradled Asha, wrapped in wolf fleece. Jon glanced at the babe's peaceful face, then at his wife's. How many burdens can one child bear? Only those we teach her to carry, Daenerys whispered. We will not repeat old sins. He slipped arm around them both. The world keeps asking for saviors. Maybe it needs gardeners. Then let's give it gardeners, she said, leaning into him. Her breath was warm and sweet with milk and cinnamon. Autumn deepened. Jon convened a meeting at Harrenhal for smiths, stonemasons, maesters, and wise women. Their aim: draft the weave accords, guidelines for managing phenomena born from reopened threads of memory, self-digging barrows, song-glass pillars, spontaneously blooming heart trees. The charter proposed study lodges where green seers and alchemists collaborated, local councils instructing farmers how to coexist with new flora, and a roaming troop of dawn wardens who would investigate anomalies. Tyrion insisted on universal literacy to ensure isolated villages understood directives. Gendry argued for forging simple devices that monitor ambient magic. Memory thermometers, he called them. Debate lasted a fortnight, but ended with ink on parchment and nods of wary hope. Rivalries had not disappeared. The Old Town conclave bristled at the prospect of sharing knowledge with hedge wizards. Some Stormlander lords muttered that Hearttree groves must yield tithes to southern churches. The Ironborn scoffed at any law passed inland, though Asha Greyjoy kept them in line by promising the first man to raid a ghost rose garden would learn if those petals sliced as sharp as gossip claimed. Still, the accords passed, in part because Edric Storm publicly pledged Navy escorts for any research ship, while Prince Quentyn sealed the treaty with a Dornish marriage alliance to Lady Willa Manderly, joining Sun and Mermaid and causing bards to hyperventilate with possibilities. Several winters drifted by, each milder than the last yet cold enough to remind. Asha learned to walk on stone floors dusted with snow that blew in when doors were left carelessly ajar. She spoke her first word at Bran's knee, tree, and her second while riding Ghost with Arya. Run. The direwolf tolerated toddler fingers tugging fur, though only she, and Bran perhaps, knew what promised pact passed between them. One spring morning, as carpenters raised a dawn warden outpost in the ruins of Deepwood Motte, word arrived that a sail of black and red had been spotted on the horizon, skirting Cape Kraken. Not a corpse ship. This canvas crackled with life and heat, as if sown of flames. Daenerys' heart flipped. She sensed her own blood stirring across sea miles. They rode to the cliffs above Lordsport and stood breathless when the vessel rounded the point. Its masts were charred, its hull patched with slabs of slate, but upon the forecastle roared Drogon, larger than the great keep, scales crimson black, eyes molten. Ashore at last, Drogon bowed his massive head to Daenerys, who pressed her brow to his, as she once did in Moiraine's pits. He threw back his neck and uttered a call that vibrated leagues. From the hold of the strange craft clambered 3 smaller dragons, 2 bronze, one silver blue, the brood he had hatched in hidden Far East nests. Their wings rustled like thundercloth. Jon realized Drogon had ferried them not as conquerors, but as migrants seeking new sky under new order. The realm panicked, of course. Ravens shrieked declarations of doom. Farmers fled fields. Septons called for prayer. But Jon summoned the council to Pike, neutral by necessity because Ironborn knew fear but answered to few lords. There, on whetstone yards that once rang with screams, Daenerys spoke from Drogon's broad back to assembled nobility. She promised dragons would guard seas from maw ships and raiders alike, that no farmer's herd would burn unless the farmer himself cast first torch. Tyrion amended with a levy, each realm contributing herd stock to feed dragons in exchange for firewatch. Prince Quentyn offered Dornish goats. Edric Storm volunteered Stormlander bulls. Even Lady Barbary Dustin committed herds, though muttering they likely tasted better than northern meat anyway. Dragons took to patrolling coasts, their reflections flickering in calm sea. Less terror than reminder of the world's living history. Pain could not be undone, but memory, tended, grew less jagged. Villagers soon learned to bow as shadows passed overhead, not in subjugation but greeting. Fishermen claimed catches doubled when bronze wings churned gulls away. A decade trickled by. Crops surged. Ghost roses spread along trade roads, their oil fueling lamps brighter and cleaner than tallow. Summer frost wines matured, revival of a vintage lost since Andal invasion. The Dawn Road extended to the Dawn Coast, where Carcosa priests arrived in carved bone ships, seeking counsel instead of conquest, intrigued by stories of a child who anchored dawn. They met Asha at Harvest Festival, now 12, nimble with bow, mischievous as her Aunt Oria, and left vowing to send scholars rather than storms. Yet not all knots untangled. In Riverlands, a sect called the Hollow Crown declared ghost rose trees unnatural, and sought to cut them wherever found. They burned orchards, scattering luminant embers across night. Dawn Wardens responded, quelling fires with streams drawn from enchanted pumps Gendry invented. But the conflict warned Jon and Daenerys that hope must be guarded by more than song. One cool evening, Jon found Asha perched atop the inner wall, legs dangling. She watched bats wheel against twilight. He climbed beside her. She turned, eyes reflecting ghost rose lamps flickering below. Uncle Bran says the weave hums louder lately, she said. Jon studied her profile. Stark jaw, Targaryen eyes, a smattering of freckles from playing under southern sun last summer. Does that worry you? She kicked heels. Maybe. But he also says hums mean life. Dead things are quiet. Jon smiled. Then may the world stay noisy. Asha giggled, then serious again. He gave me a feather. Said it belonged to a king lost to time. He said I'd know what to do with it. Kings left many feathers, Jon replied, thinking of Rhaegar's lost plumes, of old kings' hunts. What will you do? She shrugged. Maybe plant it, maybe write words with it. Maybe keep it until someone needs reminding that birds can fly even when cages break. Jon draped an arm across her shoulder. Whatever you choose, your mother and I will stand with you. She looked at him. So earnest, yet with secret sparks of wit she'd inherited from Tyrion. I know. That's why I'm not afraid. Jon searched the horizon. Beyond dusk's smudge, he pictured graves stirring, seas whispering, comets weaving. The world would never cease to test balance. But children like Asha, gardeners with swords of memory and hearts of flame, would answer. Not alone. Together. Inside the keep, Daenerys and Sansa debated amphitheater seating for a winter festival dramatizing the long night. Arya insisted on playing the Night King for comedic flair, causing uproar. Ghost snoozed by hearth. Drogon rumbled overhead, casting fleeting shadow across starlight. And somewhere far south, a barrow mound sealed itself, its false opening grown over with grass and bluish roses, the voices within settling into slumber. Jon breathed crisp air heavy with peat and pine. He thought back to the first dawn after winter ended, to the maw's black water, to the Soul Key's light, to Asha's first cry. He realized the weave was not a tapestry fixed upon a wall, but a living loom. Threads tightening, loosening, breaking, rejoining. Forever. His job was no longer to wield flame or frost, but to teach the next hands to guide shuttle and shuttlecock. He squeezed his daughter's shoulder and rose. "Come, your mother will be cross if we miss supper, and Grandfather Davos promises lemon cakes from White Harbor." Asha hopped down, grinning. "Do you suppose dragons like lemon cakes?" "Let's not test," Jon said, though he wouldn't put it past Drogon to swipe one. They descended to warmth and laughter. Behind them, ghost roses along the parapet swayed, petals glowing steady, neither too bright nor too dim, lanterns for memory. In each bloom, if one looked long, danced reflections. Of a wolf cub howling at endless night, of a girl mother of dragons stepping into her own myth, of a man and woman forging dawn out of ruin, of a small child gripping a feather promised to future skies. One bloom flickered, perhaps wind, perhaps whisper. It caught Asha's eye. She paused, touched it gently. The glow brightened. She smiled, tucked a petal into her pocket, and hurried after her father into the hall where candles, stories, and music awaited. And beyond them further years, further dawns, each one a promise that the balance born in blood and ash would hold so long as hearts remembered how to weave light through shadows.